let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Old Hospital 9999. My coworker wanted to micromanage me and didn't like that I talked back, so he reported me to our director. I apologize as this came out to be a bit longer than I wanted it to. For a bit of context, I, 25 female, work as part of the sanitation department for a hospital. We have multiple different positions, most of which work on upkeeping the cleanliness of the general areas of the hospital. This, as well as making sure patient rooms and other utilized areas are sanitized regularly to ensure patients and staff are protected as much as possible from any sort of environmental threats. We take out trash from nurses' stations, patient rooms, replace linen, clean the hallways and floors, as well as clean bathrooms daily. I started working about a year before the start of the pandemic, and as such, a lot of our processes have, as you can guess, changed and been more intense since. Our supervisors often come around to each floor to make sure everyone in our department is working properly and being diligent about their cleanings. My position was what we call a float worker. Essentially, I've been trained in every area and will be assigned to cover people who call in sick, are on their days off, or on vacation. This comes with a lot of hurdles, such as trying to remember what order everything needs to be done in every area. We've got approximately nearly 30 different areas, so sometimes I need to ask our supervisors for a quick refresh on things that need to be accomplished over the day, if I don't feel comfortable with my memory of the area. The downside to my position is I won't know until I show up to work where I will be for the day. I don't mind this, as it allows me to see a vast amount of the hospital and build a rapport with nursing staff and doctors all around. Usually, if I'm covering for someone's vacation or time off, I will know ahead of time, as my posted schedule will have me in their position for that time. Now, on to the story. About a year and a half ago, I was scheduled to cover one of our guys who works in the operating room, or OR for short, for about a month. For a little more context here, our OR team consists of 4 people. One person comes in at 6, my position which came in at 8, and 2 other positions that come in at 9 and 11. Now, I didn't mind this, as I was well acquainted with the staff there, and the area in general, since for a while I was set to cover the same person at least twice a week at the beginning of the pandemic. On top of that, working for the OR usually came with a fair bit of free time, since there wasn't a whole lot to do other than ready the room for the next patient that would be coming through. And the stuff you were assigned to do other than those rooms were usually finished before your first break anyway. There was one downside: Steve, 56 male. Steve was our afternoon guy. He came in at 11 and ended shift usually at 7:30, but later if the OR dictated it. He's a scumbag, the sort of person who thinks LGBT people are just mentally ill, and has told me at least twice that I am not built for working, and that I should be in the kitchen at home preparing dinner for my husband. I am a very open lesbian, and he refuses to accept it. This, paired with him being the epitome of a teacher's pet. You did something just a little too slow, he called our supervisors. Overrun with work and you couldn't get to your secondary tasks right away, he called our supervisors. Went to your break just a little bit late because a patient finished surgery 5 minutes before you were supposed to sit down and relax for a tiny bit, well, you can guess what he would do. Steve was the reason not a lot of people like to learn how to work the positions in the OR. If the constant calling of supervisors wasn't enough, which, trust me, it is for most people, he would insist on commenting on how you did things, try to teach you better ways of cleaning if you weren't being absolutely efficient. He would harass people constantly, especially the women, asking them if they had done this or that, and most of all, he loved to try and boss everyone from our department around. Our other OR guys have gotten used to this by now, and just ignore him for the most part, but I, on the other hand, love to take the piss out of him sometimes, just because it's fun. The first week of my month-long stint in the OR went without most of a problem from Steve, as I am normally very diligent about my work anyway, so I don't leave stuff too long to give him any reason to talk to me. The second week is where the malicious compliance truly takes place. It was one of the busiest weeks of the OR for the year. Where we would normally average just under 35 cases a day in our 10-room OR, this week we averaged 52 a day. Cases were concluding in record time, as the nurses and doctors wanted to get the heck out of Dodge before any extra cases could be added on. This meant that our little team of 4, myself, Steve, and 2 other guys, were cleaning a room right in time to then clean another room. This was the most stressed I'd seen any of these guys be, but Steve worst of all. At around noon, rooms were coming out and our early shift guy had just come back from his lunch, which he had to take an hour and a half late because of all the cases. We cut through the 2 rooms we had left, and I made a quick round of my area to make sure things weren't in shambles before I started to plan on heading to lunch. My area was as tip-top as it could be, so I checked the board before letting the guys know I was heading to lunch, since we had some free time before more cases came out. Everyone was okay with this, except for Steve, surprisingly. He stopped me, and this was the back and forth that ensued. Wait, have you checked your sinks? Yes. Scrub them before the morning rush. How about your trash cans? My god, yes, I checked them. One of them is half full, but I don't see a half hour making that full. Now, can I go? I don't want to leave. What about your hallways? Did you dust them? Yes, I did. Now please leave me alone. I need to get to lunch before. How about your high dusting? Did you get... Steve, I'm gonna ask you once, and only once. Mind your darn business and worry about your own area. And with that, I walked away. Steve very much did not like that at all. I was 10 minutes into my lunch in the OR's break room, halfway through my food, when our department director walked in. She walked over to me, tapped me on the shoulder. I had earbuds in watching an episode of anime I had missed over the weekend, and told me to meet her in our office after our lunch. I asked her what it was about, and she told me we'd talk about it when I got down there. I was pissed, to say the least. I knew that little rat had probably told our director that I had hit him or something, and was going to use my little outburst as a threat that caused him undue mental harm, and that he didn't feel comfortable working around me if I was going to act like that. Mind you, I am a 5'4", 130 pounds woman who is as sweet as pie, and Steve is 6'3" and probably 230 pounds. As I was finishing my food and watching my episode, I peeked at the monitor on the wall that kept track of patients coming into the room and leaving. Every single room was currently closing up their cases, which meant that my OR team was about to get effing rocked. I panicked for a moment. Then, I remembered what had happened with Steve, and I couldn't help myself from laughing a little bit. Cue the sweet, sweet malicious compliance. I put my lunch bag away with the other bags in the back of the break room, took the last sip of my soda as I tossed it, and walked out with a grin on my face. On my way to the elevators, I saw they had only done 1 room so far, and judging on that, I assumed it would probably take them another hour and a half to get everything finished for the rooms. Steve saw me on my way out and stopped me. OP, get your hairnet on. We have 9 other rooms that need to get cleaned. Oh, I'm so sorry, Steve. I was asked to come down to the office by our director. She had something she wanted to discuss with me and told me I had to come immediately after my lunch and to not worry about but we're getting overrun with work. I don't see how that's currently my issue. If I don't talk with her, I might get fired for insubordination. So good luck, I'll try to be as fast as I can. And I smiled as I turned away. I get down to our office and the director is sitting with one of our HR representatives. She motions me to close the door and sit down, so I do. Surprise, surprise, she pulled me in to talk about the fact that someone, of which she couldn't technically name, but everyone knew who was being talked about, came to her with a complaint about a hostile encounter, in which I made the person feel uncomfortable. I laughed a little bit and told them what had happened from my point of view. The director just kinda put her head in her hands, and the HR rep had to stifle a chuckle. It got quiet for a few moments, so I asked if I was gonna lose my job over this. Our director said that originally it was going to be a strike on my record and some disciplinary actions, such as taking some online courses about de-escalation of conflict and hostile work environments, as well as an in-service about what to do when a coworker and you don't agree on something. But after hearing my side of the story, along with the plethora of other reports made by Steve about people in the department, she said she realized that she probably shouldn't have gotten HR involved. until she heard my side of things and dismissed both the rep and myself. I walked after the rep. I remembered those times he looked down on me for being a woman. Instead of heading back upstairs to the crap show that awaited me, I closed the door, turned back around, and sat down. She looked up from her laptop, sighed, and asked what I needed. I just smiled and said, "I'd like to lodge a complaint about Steve." She stared at me for a few moments, then asked me to detail my complaint. Here is the list of things I had gotten her to put into this complaint. Micromanagement of peers, creating a hostile workspace, unnecessary reporting of coworkers, bullying, misogyny, discrimination of LGBT coworkers, sexual misconduct, once told me I like other women because you don't have a guy who can, we'll just stop there. After going through the list, providing examples and approximate dates for said examples, my director just kinda shook her head and put her fingers up to her temple. I looked at her and just said, "Bad day to be Steve?" And she nodded, "Yeah, bad day to be Steve. You can head back to work. I'll talk to him before I leave for the day." I left the office, headed back up to the OR a whopping hour later, and our OR team looked effing dreadful. Even our morning guy, who was in his mid-30s and had been doing this upwards of a decade, was looking rough. They finished all the rooms. Impressive. They all looked at me, and Steve was the first to say anything. "Took you long enough, B. Where were you?" "Oh, don't worry, you'll find out soon enough. My meeting with the director went well." "What happened?" "Oh, well, someone complained about me being aggressive, and it ended up turning into a conversation that would definitely eliminate the hostile work environment that was created here." "Good. Last thing we need is someone to feel uncomfortable up here." "Of course, Steve. Wouldn't want anyone to feel attacked or anything, right? Also, Steve, I have a question for you. Have you checked your break room yet? Last I saw, the trash was overflowing onto the floor." Steve left in a panic, and the other three of us laughed. The fallout. Now, so far it might seem like this belongs on Nuclear Revenge, but sadly the fallout wasn't what I was hoping, but it was still sweet to hear. I was informed from our director about what had happened with Steve. Since I was the person who levied the complaint, I was entitled to hear about any actions taken to correct what I had complained about, in an attempt to let me see that action was taken on my behalf. She said he would have been outright fired if I wasn't the only one who levied these complaints. While they took it seriously regardless, without other women stepping forward to say anything, they couldn't fire him off of my complaints alone. That being said, Steve was still reprimanded hard and was slapped with 2 strikes. 3 strikes get you fired, and a year worth of online learnings and in-service trainings for things such as discrimination, misogynistic reform, LGBT learnings, etc. He was also told if it was reported he said anything close to what he said to me again, he would be fired and blacklisted from hospitals in the state. In good news, since then, I have become a lead for our day shift. While I maintained my float status, covering people who were sick and whatnot, I did gain a few more dollars an hour, some leadership responsibilities, and most important of all, a fancy title to tell Steve to F off with. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Nestling12. It says, "Took you long enough, B. Where were you?" See, I'm not one to report folks, but if he'd told me this, I would have turned right back around and reported him for this as well. Call me a B? Dude, that wasn't me being a B, but I can show you what one looks like. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's more fuel for the fire to take down to HR, and I think I would have gone back down there and reported that as well. It's really a hostile environment, and with all the information that OP brought to HR, I'm really surprised that they didn't can him on the spot. I guess in this day you need to have more proof, more than a he said, she said situation, but I honestly don't know for sure because I've been out of the real working world for over 4 years now. This story comes to us from ZMDYX. Karen demands to go through bear territory, almost gets mauled by a grizzly. So for a little context, this story is not mine. This happened to my father in the 80s and the 90s, but I will write in the first person because English is hard. In the 80s, I lost everything I could. I dropped out of college, my father died of a heart attack, and my mother was somewhere in the wind. I wasn't worth the air I was breathing. As a last effort, I saved up some money to move to a different state so that I could start fresh. I chose Montana to be my new home. Because I didn't have a college degree, I knew I could only make a living with my hands and not my head. After a bit of looking around, I found work on a ranch. The owner of the ranch, let's call him Jack, took me under his wing. He taught me how to ride a horse, how to herd, how to do cutting, roping, and many other useful skills on a ranch. My goal was to have enough money for a deposit so I could buy a house or at least some land. After about 3 years, I had the money, but I loved the ranch and the folks so much that I chose to stay longer. In the spring of '88, I finally made the decision to quit. I was fully honest with Jack about what my intentions were. I told him that I wanted to buy some land to have a ranch of my own and potentially get married and start a family. Being the absolute champ, Jack offered me some contacts of people who were selling land. After some time, I chose a piece of land near Jack's ranch. I got a loan, bought the land, and in the summer, I started building my house. By winter, the house was done, and it was planned that in the spring, I'll build a barn and some fences, corrals, among others. In the spring, it was back to work, and before summer started, I had nothing to do. I had a lot of time on my hands while I was waiting for all the paperwork to be done. And I wasn't going to spend 2 weeks sitting on my porch doing nothing when Jack promised me that if I would ever need it, he would give me a job. Now, I didn't need a job because of money, but I just didn't have anything to do. So I went to my good old friend Jack if he needed some help. He said that he could use me to guide people on the tours he was offering. His ranch is not only in the cattle business, he also offers tours of the pristine nature on his property. I happily accepted the job, despite me not liking people. But still, it was better than just sitting on my front porch and doing nothing. The first few days went without a problem, but then a wild Karen appeared to brighten up the day. I was just returning from a tour when I saw this Karen in the middle of the field yelling at this girl, who was also a guide. I didn't know the girl, but in my books, whoever makes a girl cry is a butthole. I came over to them and in the most passive-aggressive voice I can, I say, "Good day, what seems to be the problem?" And the Karen's wrath was now aimed at me, and she yelled back, "This bee has no respect for the desires of the customer. Give me a manager now." Now, I didn't expect such strong wording, but I kept my cool despite my hot-headedness, and I came up to the girl, who's now sobbing because this Karen was mouthing off to her pretty good. And I say to her, "Leave her to me, I'll take care of her. You go take a break and tell Jack that I'll be with this piece of work." She gives me a grateful smile and a nod and rides away. I go to the Karen and say to her, "Ma'am, I can't get you the manager as he's busy right now, but if you want, I can be your guide in her stead for the remainder of the tour." She replies very politely by saying, "Sure, I think even the trees will be better than that bee." Every part of my hot-headed self wants me to pretty much bury this woman right then and there, but I keep my cool and we head off on the tour. And within the first minute, what a piece of work she truly is. She behaves like she knows best, and everyone is lesser than her, and everything should be given to her. When we are about to turn around and go back, I give her a choice. We could either go the official route, or we could return by the unofficial route, which is shorter, but there were bear sightings reported in the past few days. I tell her that the unofficial route is quite dangerous, but just as I wanted her to do so, she vehemently objects because she is the wisest person alive and knows the best. Great, my trap had worked. After about 5 miles on this unofficial route, she starts screaming and turns so pale that she is even more white than paper. In the distance, there is a grizzly. I knew about the danger I dragged both of us into, but in the end, it was technically her choice to go that route. I tell her to make herself as big and loud as she can. I follow suit, but the bear keeps getting closer. It keeps growling at us. With every growl, Karen was getting even more pale. After it gets way too dangerous, I shoot a round out of my rifle, and the bear gets scared and runs away into the woods. The entire ride back, she keeps yelling at me that I put her intentionally in so much danger. And yes, I'll admit, it was quite reckless taking a visitor into a part of the woods where there were bear sightings reported, but technically she made the decision to go that route. I stay silent the entire ride because I can't keep a straight face. I was laughing maniacally in my head, and I knew that if I looked at her, I would start laughing out loud. When we returned, she was shaking violently and was pale as ever. After I tied up her horse, she demanded that I get her the manager, and I gladly pointed her to the little building in the distance, and she storms off. She starts yelling at Jack, and I can see that Jack is trying his hardest not to break out laughing. I could hear that she was demanding that I be fired, but the neat part was, I wasn't an employee of Jack's. I was doing it as a favor for a friend, and thus, I couldn't be fired. After Karen's tirade ends, Jack comes to me laughing like a kid, and he asks me, "How did you even come up with that, OP?" I start giggling as well and answer, "Well, she made the girl cry, so I wanted to give her special treatment. I heard of the bear sightings, and it worked out well in my favor." He then asks me not to do that again as it was reckless, and I agree and tell Jack I don't plan on doing it again, but I had a plan if the bear mauled the damn wretch. My defense would be that I gave her the choice to go on a safer path, but because she was apparently of higher intellect than me, I simply agreed. Jack gave me a smile and heads off. Years later, my father would end up meeting that girl guide again. Her name was Abby, but nowadays, I simply call her Mom. Jumping down to the comment section, there's one from a user called Anarchy. It says, "I truly don't understand why anyone would still humor this woman after she swore at an employee and abused her. Whatever happened to, I'm sorry ma'am, your money is no longer good here. I just don't get it." OP replied to this one and said, "Man, of course this is the most sensible option, but that's just who my father is. That's simply the way things were here in the West." See, the major problem here is that when we let Karens be a Karen, it just enforces that they can get away with that behavior. We need to put our foot down. We need to say that's not acceptable. You can't treat people like that, and you're not going to get what you want. In fact, Karen, I think you should get the F off of the property. But I guess that's not how it works in some places, and that really sucks. This story comes to us from Smooth Area 1206, Schooled in Compliance. It's the late 80s, early 90s in the UK, but the compliance runs over about 5 years. Puberty hit me hard and early just as I started high school, 11 years old. If that wasn't enough to deal with, it also saw between the acne, eczema, and psoriasis, my skin becoming a huge red and blotchy mess of blisters, psoriatic plaques, and acne breakouts, to the point just laying down left little spots of blood on shirts, t-shirts, and bed sheets. Over the summer between my first and second year, it got considerably worse. None of the medicated creams were helping, and the only time I got any sort of relief was when I was given steroids and antibiotics for the frequent chest infections I got. But that wasn't a long-term solution. The second year of high school gave us a whole new bunch of school rules to abide by. This is where the compliance begins. By the end of the first week of the year, I'd already had complaints about my appearance. My form tutor, Mrs. G, an amazing woman, understood the issues I was having, not just with the skin, but my home life too. My folks had split, dad was a drunk, and that's a whole other story for another Reddit. So our income wasn't great. Mom worked 2 jobs, and her mental health wasn't the best either, dealing with the messy divorce, etc. But apparently the little bloodstains on my shirt were against the new business-like dress code, meant to prepare us for our work lives after school. So letters went home and I got a detention, since they were in the no exceptions period. Mom was annoyed, so we instigated an undershirt rule and short sleeve shirts to leave the worst areas open, and we got our GP to issue a medical note regarding my skin. After all, I was there almost every week it seems. This wasn't enough, and the more unforgiving teachers really kicked up about my arms being shown and using the words appalling and detrimental to the learning environment, despite my classmates knowing about the issues and not being overly bothered. So I was told off again, and this time sent up to the head of year tutor for a formal meeting. Now, Mr. E was a rather amiable older guy who taught languages, and he had a well-known catchphrase in the school. "I like it, I do it myself, just not in school," which was used liberally when it came to catching kids with shirts untucked, smoking, or making out under the staircases. He was apologetic, knowing it was a medical issue, and requested the GP to do something, repeating the line detrimental to the learning environment, and that being in the business of learning, I had to conform. I was given 14 days for my skin to improve, or I would be placed in more detentions as per policy. 2 weeks go by, and my skin from stress was breaking out everywhere, so I end up in detention each night for a week, missing the school bus, which really pissed my mom off and her boss, given she had to come and collect me since it would have taken over an hour for me to walk home. Each time Mr. E or another year tutor was there, complaining about the state of my skin and asking why I wasn't taken to a doctor. Each time my mom showing the appointment slips and notes from the GP. Finally, it seemed like my arms were settling just as my face erupted with acne, and shaving my face was a mess. This pissed off the school even more. So my mom suggested that one of the teachers, like Mr. E, attend a doctor's appointment with me and to tell the doctor what they thought. They discussed this, and eventually it was decided that the teacher to come along was Mr. E himself. Mr. E complained at the order that came from the headmaster, a grizzled old teacher who had a dirty, unkempt beard and eyebrows like rutting caterpillars, and he passed on his complaints to me and my mother. I did my best to ignore his eyes that seemed to be drilling into me angrily, as my mom went in to speak to my doctor first for her appointment. She explained what was happening as I was called in next. Mr. E stormed into the room ahead of me, immediately trying to lay down school rules. I remember phrases like, "This is school policy," and "Our job to prepare them for working life," and "I don't care about side effects of medication, it needs to be done now." The doctor looked down over his glasses and just asked, "You are?" smiling at my mom, to which Mr. E did an impression like a goldfish. He asked to see my back and arms, so I took off my shirt. For the first time, Mr. E saw the full extent of the issue and just went white. The doc said to anyone who was listening, "Stress and puberty don't help conditions like this, and they will, given time, normally settle down." He asked if I'd been using the cream. I nodded, as he picked at one problematic area, removing one of the plaques, saying he sent this to the lab as it looked a little unusual. Mr. E remained quiet as he examined me further, looking at how easy my skin bled in certain areas. The doc said I could get dressed again. "You're a teacher?" he said, looking at Mr. E. "I'm a school governor for X school, our immediate rival, and I'm also on the local education authority board." Mr. E's color still hadn't returned, but he nodded. The doc then went to his computer and typed out another letter, this time effectively adding that I can be excused from the usual rules as a new medical policy was being written by the LEA that all schools must follow. He then told Mr. E he could leave. He sat and chatted to both me and my mom for a while and basically said to continue what I was doing and it will clear up. He said the letters will be at the desk along with another prescription for us both. Mom gave Mr. E the letter and just said, "I hope that puts an end to this nonsense." Mom didn't bother dropping Mr. E back at the school. The next day, Mr. E ignored me, and to be honest, most of the teachers were either their usual grouchy self or sickly sweet, with Mrs. G being her usual happy self, asking about the appointment as if she knew what had gone down in the staff meeting. End of term was upon us, so for a whole fortnight, I didn't bother shaving and let my face just rest. So the return to school, I shaved and cleaned up the best I could. And Mr. E was immediately on my case, be it my work in his French and Spanish class or just in general. I'd go home and tell Mom all about it and she would take notes. Now into year 9 or third year of high school, 14 years old, it's 1991. Skin was healing in parts, but my face looked like a volcano, and I'd grown out a neat little mustache, which my mom helped me neatly trim, and we had managed to sort out the really dry lips, so I could eat and drink without them splitting, which had put me off food. Now the new medical exemption had come into effect, forcing the school to change their rules. As I got off the bus, I could see the teachers immediately go into meltdown over the facial hair, and they weren't happy. I got to lunchtime before I was dragged by my collar into the year tutor's office and had 3 of them and a deputy head lay into me about it. They demanded I remove it, handing me a single cheap razor that looked as if it had been used. I refused to shave, citing my medical note and that I wouldn't use anyone else's razor purely for my own safety given the existing issues. So I was sent home. It seems my mom had been called, so she had called the doctor about it given his role in the LEA. I arrived at school the next day, my mustache still in place, and was called into the headmaster office, only to introduce to the chair of the LEA and my doctor, with the head looking a little browbeaten. Apparently, the chair had already been shown photos of my back and arms by my doctor, and could see what's happening with my face and the neat mustache. He asked me a few questions and smiled, saying this wasn't my fault, etc. And that a new rule, especially for my school, was being put into place, and it would be checked frequently, and I or any student could ask for a surprise check to be made by LEA staff. The new rule was, if students were meant to live by the strict dress and appearance code, then so were the teachers, and only those with medical exemptions like mine were allowed, but it had to be neat and tidy. I was there to see an announcement being made over the rarely used school tannoy system. It was reconfirmed in the school assemblies over the following week. Letters went home to parents, and it seemed there was a sigh of relief among them, as it seems I wasn't the only one getting grief from the rules that had been in place. The teachers had 2 weeks to adjust. The whole LEA was there to check the teachers, and a number had public meltdowns in regards to their appearance, including the deputy head Mrs. B, who normally wore layers of makeup and blue eyeshadow, who swore up and down she was exempt because she was deputy head. Stories spread around the school like wildfire. Even Mr. R, the headmaster, lost his beard. Yes, I got more grief about it, but Mrs. G kept them away from my grades. The mustache stayed until the end of my time in high school. Funnily enough, over that summer, my skin seemed to clear up almost instantaneously. So by my first day of college to do my A-levels, my face was clear, and I could shave off the mustache. My brother attended the school the September after I left. The teachers didn't give him a hard time for fear of what he would do, but the firm rule stayed in place about teachers' appearance until the school merged with the rival back in 2013. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called "This Will Soon End Badly." It says, "My blood is boiling over the fact that so many adults were happy to put you through that, as if you were bleeding from everywhere for fun or something. Your mom is a rock star and your doctor is a badass. I hope you're thriving nowadays." OP responded to this and said, "I dropped facial hair for a while, but now use it to cover up a few scars, so rock a beard and a mustache." It sounds to me like these teachers just needed something to argue about, like they didn't like OP for some reason. What kind of person puts you in detention for something you have absolutely no control over, like a skin disorder? That makes absolutely no sense. Even a little bit of common sense, and they would have realized that OP couldn't do anything about this. Somebody in OP's situation should just be getting sympathy from the school and accommodations to help. This whole story is absolute bullcrap. This story comes to us from Simon Pig. You want this app fully released at February 1st? No problem. Years ago, I was a low-level IT manager at a major media company. My team was understaffed. We had too many projects to care for and no IT tester to test our apps. So me, the programmers, and the product owner, a business side, non-technical member, needed to test our apps ourselves. The IT director, my boss, never helped with this issue because of budget reasons. It was common knowledge that the company has major money problems for years. It sucked, but we managed to properly care for our apps. Our primary project was redesigning our sport news app that produced the biggest revenue with mobile ads. The app was 8+ years old at this point, and it worked like a really old car. So obviously we were creating it from scratch. It was a slow process because at the same time we needed to update and fix many other apps. We were basically a skeleton crew. The problem started when the product owner left and was replaced by someone that I can only describe as cartoonishly not fit for the job. It was a person that did not care for the product, users, or other people. The only important thing for her was to make her boss, a business director, happy. An ideal yes man. She also was lazy and had no true experience or knowledge about creating mobile apps. She never really did anything important that the former product owner did. What she was doing was organizing meetings, going to meetings, drinking coffee, and just slacking off on the web. It was not a big deal for me because I did my job well and everything was going forward as planned. And she behaved okay-ish. Important part is that she did not test the app, and she really didn't know or wanted to know the app. I have never seen her using any of our apps now that I think about it. One day, she informed us that there is some internal deadline for finishing our app, and it is February 1st, almost a full year later. This is just some budgeting date that for any sane company is not that important for in-house projects. We informed her that with all our responsibilities and lack of programmers, the chances of finishing every planned function are near zero. But we could release a basic version of the app without this and that function for a really small portion of the users, like 1%. Later, we could update the app with missing stuff and then progressively go to 100%. She was happy with the solution and the whole team was informed about our plan. So we proceeded as before, creating the new app and caring for the other apps at the same time, and informed about our new app progress every week. Fast forward to November, and I have a short vacation period. When I return, I learn that the new PO is furious with our progress, even though everything is going according to plan. During my absence, she informed our bosses that we are in crisis mode because the app will not be ready for February 1st, and we, and mainly me, are to blame. Turns out, her boss wanted the whole app to be ready and not some basic version of it. She never really informed him of our agreed plan, or he changed his mind, or whatever. So she tells everyone that the plan was always to fully release the whole app. And now, we are the liars. No one took our side, and at this point, I was already looking for a new job, because F that crap. We needed to cut many functions after all, because it was just impossible at this point to finish them. Here's the malicious compliance. I stayed at the company until the deadline, and the last thing I did was releasing the new app to every single user. One of the most important parts of the app were the mobile ads that created the revenue. The app itself was free. I created the ads just as I was told to, and tested them myself. The PO did not test the app. So nobody noticed that the new app had way less ads that were showing way less frequent. But what the app had is more bugs, of course, because we couldn't properly test everything with that amount of work in that short time with no tester. Month after release, the ad revenue plummeted and the users were not happy with the app. So many of them moved to other news apps. I was happily working somewhere else at this time, and I heard that it was total chaos with this new app. Because of the revenue issue, the PO and her boss even considered bringing the old app back, which is hilarious, because that crap barely worked. Last time I checked, even the most die-hard programmer that worked there for more than a decade, which is a miracle in IT, said F it and left sometime later. Years later, and she still works there, the current team is still understaffed and overworked, the apps are buggy and poorly managed. Meanwhile, I have the best job of my life, and for many years, everyone is extra happy with my management. OP added a couple of edits down below. The first one says, in my country, working in IT is a general term. It can be sysadmin, it can be software dev, it can be even scrum master. I was both software dev and a manager. Also, I'm not a native English speaker, so sorry for any mistakes. 2. Yes, I effed up royally by not getting exact scope of our plan in writing. Of course, I know that now. I was stupid back then, and I did not expect to be effed like that by someone from my own team. We had UX sheets, etc., but it was for the whole app. There was no indication what will be in the finished product. This was in-house project, not some software house job. 3. To everyone implying that I made this up, why would I? This is not some crazy, I was super smart and my revenge was awesome story. I'm the stupid effing idiot in this rather boring story. If I would be making this up, there would be at least 3 explosions, guys. 4. Yes, right now I have the best job ever. And by that, I mean the salary is great, the project is fun, and I work with awesome people. I'm not saying I'm some president of human-cat relations, because that would really be the best job ever. Also, I was not fired, I bailed as soon as I found a better job. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Wooden11. It says, always get it in writing, especially when you think everything is all good. If the project manager is so inept they can't even make meeting minutes a sprint report, then do it yourself and send a brief follow-up email just to document and validate what I have for the meeting agreements and action items. Yeah, we hear this in a lot of stories. You really do need to cover your butt when it comes to any kind of work. Whether it's going bad, whether it's going good, start now. Document everything. Collect the paperwork. Collect the emails. Have that in your back pocket. Because when things go to crap, you just might need that information to come out on top. OP, I'm glad you're in a job you're enjoying now because it really sounds like that last one was absolute BS. This story comes to us from Sisek Dog. All the overtime you want? Okay. First time poster, hope I don't fudge it up. So this happened a couple years ago when I was 19 to 20, somewhere around then. As a wee lad, I got a job working at a local superstore while attending college. I was a cashier. It sucked, but honestly wasn't as bad as it could have been. My immediate manager helped protect the cashiers from the higher ups, but those are war stories for another day. As time went on, as it does, eventually the dreaded holiday season came around, Thanksgiving week to be exact. I got the week off of school due to the holidays and was scheduled to work a juicy 40 hours that week, but unfortunately was scheduled to work all Thanksgiving and Black Friday. My schedule had Thursdays off, but Thanksgiving falls on a Thursday, and I was being forced to work. The good news is, at least they fed us a ton of food in the break room. That was honestly nice, but I was bummed that I had to miss the holiday with family since I had prepared to have the day off as I thought I would. Now, before we get into the malicious compliance, a quick note. The store did not allow overtime. You were given extra lunches, sent home early, whatever they had to do to avoid paying out. If you got overtime, you were either lucky or you had a major problem you were being made to handle. Management was salaried, and the enlisted workers were lucky to get 38 plus hours. No extra money for the folks in the trenches. As we are a major store that caters to everything from groceries to electronics, we prepare for a very long week that tends to mark the hustle and bustle of the holiday season as a whole. The energy is pretty low as we all really dread this time of year, and I am extra nervous. This is my first retail job in the front lines during the holidays, and I heard of all the horror stories about what is coming. The store manager gathers up a lot of the workers for a quick announcement that Monday. He tells us that essentially we are really behind and have a ton of work to do, and this is going to be a rough and wild week. So he is authorizing any and all overtime across all departments from today until Sunday. He told the managers and department heads that if an employee wanted to work, let them work. We need the coverage. Later on, we would discover what he meant was letting us come in on our days off to work an extra shift or two. Tack on a nice 8 hours to our paychecks. Whoops. If an employee wants to work a shift, let them work. And oh boy, oh lord, oh gosh, oh golly gee willikers, did we want to work. Let me tell you, we went crazy. I pulled 6 doubles that week. Someone parked their RV in the parking lot and worked what had to most likely be forbidden due to labor laws. People were working maximum hours. One day, I worked so long, our manager gave me 3 lunch breaks. Dozens of people jumped at this opportunity. The next day, I came in and saw the overnight guys still petering around. We milked that week for every hour. every cent of possible overtime. I don't recall all the numbers and such directly, but I think I went from a 72-hour paycheck to one that had about 118, and around 42 was overtime, which was 1.5 times paid. It's been a few years, but those numbers feel right. Also, if you work on Thanksgiving, you were given a single-use 25% off coupon to use in the store on one big order. Since I used my overtime on stuff to buy in the store, it felt like I earned an extra 25% on top of that. Management let it happen. No one said anything to store manager that week, and he sat in his office. It was 2 days after that week that some corporate suit showed up and gave him a verbal beating when they realized he blatantly authorized that. I think early on he realized his mistake, but the die was cast. And truth be told, we did need to get the work done. All that overtime, and we barely were ready for the open door on Black Friday. He was mad, shouted at a couple managers after he got yelled at, asking why they let us work so much, but they just shrugged. If an employee wants to work a shift, let them. It was immediately dropped and was clear it would never be allowed again, and policy would remain as it was. I bought a TV, a month plus of groceries, Christmas gifts for everyone, a new car battery, 2 new tires, and some random things here and there for myself. It was worth it. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called dbowwacker. Sure. I mean, give the guy a medal. He got the store ready, and with all the holidays, I can't imagine they lost money. Yeah, this is right. And one other thing to think about here is if anybody else like OP decided to spend that overtime money in the store, well, they were getting it back anyway. So kind of a win-win situation for the employees and the management and the company as a whole. This story comes to us from MD Lapla. New boss gives angry me an impossible task. I don't know if this is exactly malicious compliance, kind of a revenge story. I used to work for a big IT consulting company notorious for not paying overtime. I worked for a client's migration project for almost 1.5 years, leading the functional migration team. The 3 of us worked for the client 3 years before the start of the migration project, so we knew the data we had to migrate, all the nuances, and 2 weeks before the migration date, 99% of the data was already migrated and validated. We only did the day-by-day new data and SAG off pretty much those last 2 weeks. Other manager that outranked me became extremely angry about our calmness because the part she led was behind schedule due to bad scheduling, and everyone was being overworked because of her mishaps. Come migration date Saturday starting 9 a.m., everyone was expecting long hours of work, but we clocked out at noon with the data validated with the client and the go-ahead signed, sealed, and delivered. My team got a written commendation from the client. The manager's team spent the entire weekend there. She got a complaint letter from the client. The manager complained about us and made me and my senior analyst spend the next month waiting for incidences, bugs, complaints. We got 5 in the whole month. My senior analyst spent 8 hours a day studying a new language. I took a chance to update my CV, I wanted out, and pretty much help a couple former colleagues that needed to solve bugs and problems within the manager's team responsibilities. A couple weeks later, evaluation time. At the IT company, everyone was graded A to D. A being exceeding expectations, D being you're out of here. B was good, C was pretty much I'm starting to think you might not be good to work here. Given the commendation from the client, I was expecting an A. My evaluation was done by the manager and my mentor, close friend with the manager. They gave me a C because we didn't see any pressure on your work and you certainly lack motivation. I complained and took a long overdue, already planned month-long vacation. This was June. After that, back at work, I was assigned to a project on another client led by manager's husband. He wanted me to prepare 122 integrations with different systems in 4 months. I told him that in the previous project, led by his wife, they took 2 years to have 12 integrations ready, but I would give it a shot. I even emailed him the planning where it clearly showed the time they took. 2 of those months were July and August, months where pretty much everyone on the client goes on holiday. Manager and wife also went on holiday pretty much all August. I spent those 2 months chasing people around the client's office. But starting in September, 6 integrations were closed and 6 more were almost closed pending validation. Manager came back from holidays and was furious. He called me a slacker and started telling me that his wife was right, that I lacked motivation, and that I would need to spend the rest of the project duration working till midnight to make up for lost time. And I said, no, I won't do an hour more than what you're paying. I told you that your expectations were unrealistic, and you went ahead with them anyways. He went ballistic. I replied, I just lack motivation to work in your project. I want out of the project. I was out of the project in no time. I got a call from my mentor. She said that they were evaluating firing me without pay because of this. I told them about the unrealistic planning. She said that I was being unrealistic and that the planning was good. I produced the email I sent the manager. My mentor went quiet. A minute later, she told me, what do you want? If you can't guarantee I won't do an hour of overtime ever again, I want out, full severance, and then some, and I want the company to make it look like I quit, not that you fired me. She went quiet again. She said she'll see what she could do. I was out of there smiling by the end of the day. OP added an edit at the bottom. It says, PS, from the team that remained in the project, 4 guys were on my team before the migration project. They all complained. They all got out of the project as well. PS2, as far as I know, the project took twice the expected time to be completed. Manager's husband got nearly fired. Wife held a lot of power and managed to save his butt. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Uber. It says, not the point of your post, but I want to point out that a mentor, among other things, is a person that has your back and advocates for you. Your mentor doesn't sound like much of a mentor. OP responded to this and said she was, until her friend complained against me. And another user called Metalsmith21 said, I think you are mistaken. In that case, she was never your mentor. You deserved better. I went back and reviewed the numbers a bit in this one, and I'm seeing 2 months of work, they got 6 done, and 6 one step away from being done. So they did almost the same amount of work in 2 months that the other team did in 2 years. Now, I don't know anything about this field of work, but it sounds like OP knocked that one out of the park. So there should be no bad vibes from management here because OP was doing a pretty darn good job. This story is another example of managers just not knowing what they're managing and setting unreasonable expectations for members of their teams because they haven't done the actual work themselves before. This story comes to us from Once Was a Worker. She must go on leave and I won't hear any excuses. So this happened a few years ago. I was a union delegate at a large firm. We had a manager called Karen, I've written about her before on this subreddit, who was appointed to a role by a director of the company. Let's call the director her uncle. Karen wasn't very clever. She hadn't finished high school and previously worked as a receptionist. She once told me 40 was half of 100. Karen is struggling in her job and basically does nothing. Her desk is a mess of paperwork. She also looks after all the small departments like records, security, stores, etc. If anyone takes on Karen, the director steps in and Karen gets a get out of jail card. There were a few occasions when Karen got yelled at by a manager for making costly mistakes, and Karen was put on stress leave and manager got a warning. One of the paralegals, Sally from Records, comes to me to say she thinks she's in trouble. Sally recently had 6 weeks leave. She was forced on leave due to having too much annual leave. Once you have more than 6 weeks, you are forced to go on leave until you have no more than 2 weeks. Sally tells me that HR and Karen enforced her on leave, and she submitted a paper leave form the same day Karen was put on stress leave. Sally went on leave, came back the same day as Karen. Sally's leave wasn't docked, she just got paid as per regular. While Karen was away, they replaced her with Paula, who found Karen hadn't really done any work for 7 months. I found Paula and asked casually about what happened. She told me on day 1, she threw all the paperwork out and started over again. So I attended a meeting with Sally, Karen, and HR, knowing there isn't a record of Sally's leave. Karen starts the meeting on a verbal rampage about not doing as she told Sally to do. Sally needs to go on leave now, or else she doesn't want to hear excuses. I interject at this point and point out to HR that Karen's behavior is unacceptable, but we agree, cue malicious compliance, as Sally has over 8 weeks leave now, she will go on leave effective tomorrow. Sally submits a leave form to Karen and we leave the meeting. Sally's leave is reduced on her payslip this time. No one questioned a thing. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called ExcellentAd1132. It says, so Sally gets 4 extra weeks of vacation for free. Not a bad deal for her. Too bad that someone does not go above Karen's uncle and let them know what a waste of space Karen is and how she really isn't doing her job, where it is clear that she is clueless. Actually, it appears here that the commenter was wrong because they have 8 weeks and they need to get it down to 2, so they're getting 6 extra weeks for free. That's a lot of time off work. I'd be worried about things changing too much after just taking 6 weeks off and then having to take another 6 weeks off. I wouldn't even know the job I was coming back to at that point, but rest assured I'd be very refreshed after that kind of a vacation, especially a paid one. This story comes to us from MD Lapla. Boss wants me to cut internet to employees? I comply. When I was at the university, a friend landed a part-time job doing networking for a really small company and asked me if I wanted in because he also had other customers and was worried he wouldn't be able to handle them all. It was easy money, 12 hours per month, to basically maintain the network infrastructure, upgrade firmware on routers, check logs, run antivirus software, and install some crap on computers. So I said yes. The company used to fix and sell printers and printer-related stuff. It was run by 2 ladies that were friends, let's call them May and June, but the CEO in functions was May's husband. Let's call him CEO Peter, who was also June's husband's best friend. The rest of the company were Accountant Peter, that shared the name with the CEO, some technicians that were never there, and 2 hardworking sales representatives. Basically, the accountant, technicians, and sales reps were the only ones doing work there. Even though May and June were also technically sales reps, they hardly ever made a call. May spent all day browsing internet for things to buy. Her thing was shoes. June spent all day chatting with another guy, not her husband, who also shared the name with the CEO. Let's call him Third Peter. And CEO Peter spent all day watching adult material. Yes, at work. May appeared to have no problems with CEO Peter's habits. I spent most of the time there trying to clean CEO Peter's computer from the myriad of viruses that he would install browsing sketchy sites. And even when I complained a lot about it to him, he said that he didn't know why there were so many viruses and kept doing it every single day. This place was full of drama, and after a while, me and my friend would pretend to have work to do there and spent time there just for the laughs. One day, May approaches me furious, saying that she caught one of the sales reps browsing the internet instead of doing calls. She wanted to disable internet for the reps. I checked the logs. The rep browsed the spec of one of the machines she was selling, a newer model she wasn't familiar with. So, cue malicious compliance, I disabled internet for the whole company. About 2 minutes later, May, June, and CEO Peter came running to the server room, shouting about what the heck was happening to their internet. Accountant and sales rep pretty much never realized something changed because they were hard at work. I told them that May made me do it. She said, but just to the reps. And I told them some bull that I couldn't block a specific IP because they were assigned dynamically, so they were about to change and blah blah blah. CEO Peter was red as a tomato. He demanded to reinstate internet for everyone. I looked at June, she nodded. I looked at May, she said, "Are you sure you can't just for them?" I said no. She exhaled. "Okay then, internet is back up." OP added a couple of edits onto this story. The first one says, PS1, company dissolved when June sent an email meant for third Peter to accountant Peter while he was looking at a thing with CEO Peter, who saw the email. That day, I think, we spent like 4 hours in the company. The only thing lacking was popcorn. PS2 says, CEO Peter made hilarious attempts to hide his adult material usage. Once he had a CD named something like, you can read that on the screen, and told me it was a kid's movie. PS3, June had a post-it note with her password at one side of the screen. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Noob9. They quoted OP saying, he didn't know why there were so many viruses and kept doing it every single day. Well, as the network guy, just block the sites and argue that you blocked all sites that are a threat to the company. OP responded to this comment and said, I did try, I gotta give it to the guy. He had a way of finding something that wasn't blocked every single week. Furthermore, the more I blocked, the sketchier and more virus-ridden sources he found. So after a while, I removed the blocks, put his computer on a separate network to avoid widespread viruses, and stopped trying. I can't believe that OP left us hanging, saying that there was an email sent by June that dissolved the whole company. I mean, come on. That's the real story we want to read here. OP, please add an update onto this or another post altogether, because I think I can speak for everybody here at KCC and say that we all want to hear that story. I hate being left hanging. This story comes to us from someone we've covered a bunch of times on this channel in the past, Cole Carmot. Loss Prevention wants us to put in service calls. This may be my last contribution due to the upcoming changes, so I wanted it in my favorite subreddit. I work for a printing company, and as I tell a lot of people, much of my job is literally malicious compliance. People wanting things printed despite how they look, spelling and design errors, and just being plain ugly. This is another story that has come up these past 2 weeks. A while ago, one of the other locations absolutely destroyed one of their printers. Toner everywhere. The finisher unit was a hunk of plastic and metal. I genuinely don't know what they did to the machine, but it was FUBAR based on the photo, especially since the toner cartridge is not in the finisher unit. An investigation took place and it was discovered that rather than calling in printer technicians to repair the machines, some of the company employees were repairing them instead. A company-wide message went out essentially telling everyone not to repair or perform maintenance on the machine ourselves. Genuinely common sense things that had to be put on paper because someone did something stupid. We were always supposed to put in service calls to the techs to come take care of the machines, or we will be brought to HR. 3 months later, last week, 2 guys from Loss Prevention, who will be Tweedledum and Tweedledummer, came in to do a regular check-in. Everything was going great until I needed to change the paper in one of the printers. Tweedledum approached me and basically began raking me over the coals, saying that only technicians can open the machines. Of course, I am dumbfounded because all I am doing is changing the paper, but just shrug and say, sorry, won't happen again. Well, the next day, I was brought into a meeting with HR over video call, basically wagging their finger at me. My boss, D, took the fall for me and said he was the one to tell me to change the paper. So I got off scot-free, and D only got a slap on the wrist. Thankfully so, as this would have been my second write-up in 2 months. The first was a stupid but legitimate mistake on my part. However, as a result of this, The whole facility went into malicious compliance mode after that meeting. Need to change out the paper trays? Service call. Paper jam? Better put in a service call. Need to change the toner? That's a service call. Our output of jobs last week was absolutely in the toilet. Machines were down for nearly 90% of the shifts. The techs were having a field day, however, as they got paid per call they took. While our backlog is through the roof, we were able to make our point eventually. I am not sure exactly what had been happening in the background, but today I received a handwritten apology from Tweedledum and Tweedledummer with a $50 Visa gift card, saying they didn't understand what our job required when they reprimanded me and referred me to HR. We are back at full capacity now and have a huge backlog to catch up on. I'm hoping in addition to this gift card, I can also get in some approved overtime for some extra spending money on an upcoming trip I have planned. The company I work for may be dim at times, but at least they often admit when they make a mistake. OP added a couple updates underneath this one. The first one says Update 1, so I learned a bit more about the situation. The loss prevention people that were involved were the ones directly dealing with the loss of the destroyed printer, and there turned out to be a misunderstanding about everything. My other coworker in the copy center has gotten into the habit of putting excess paper in the opposite side the paper tray as storage. The tray can hold up to 12 by 18 paper, so when there is 8.5 by 11 in there, they use the extra space for storage. The techs and D has told them not to do that as they can damage the machine. Whenever I see the excess paper, I take it out. That's what loss protection saw, and why they reprimanded me in the first place. They assumed since I was working with the machines, I was the one who put that extra paper in. I learned this when the company assigned Karen was written up and made it rather vocal today. The problem with working with a good company like this is that it takes way too long to get rid of problem employees. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called CFWY Dirk. It says, WTF, an apology and a gift card? Nice. Plus maybe some overtime? I'd like companies that try to show they do care. OP responded to this comment and said, it's why I stick with this strange collection of clowns. As long as we do our work, they support us. Very rarely do you find a company that understands happy employees means increased productivity. OP is absolutely correct on that one. In most companies, the management just don't know what's going on below them. They don't care about the people below them. They just care about padding their own paychecks. I've seen that many times myself in the myriad of places that I've worked at over the years. And as you guys know from previous videos and the comments I make, I've had a lot of jobs. This story did make me question the intelligence level of the loss prevention officers though, because they decided to come down on OP for replacing paper. You would think they would know the difference when they're looking at somebody over changing paper and taking apart a piece of equipment to fix it. But I guess not in this case. This story comes to us from Hi Reddit 7685. The accidental malicious compliance against world expert. This occurred back in the 70s, and before I start, I want to emphasize, I was never stupid enough and will never be stupid enough to use my hidden talent. Background: I was taking an elective criminal forensic CSI stuff night course at a local community college. The best part about taking this course was the instructor, which meant an in-depth tour at the US Criminal Forensic Lab, where he worked as the question document examiner, handwriting analysis, signature matching, etc. Also, since computers were barely introduced into forensics at this time, all handwriting analysis and matching was done by hand, and this instructor was one of, if not the best in the world. The malicious compliance as good as I remember. It was a great course studying many facets of criminal forensics and taking the amazing lab tour. As the course was coming to the end, the question document facet approached, the instructor's specialty. At the end of the class, just before it started, the instructor wrote a paragraph on the board, and we each had 2 sheets of blank lined paper. He told us to write the paragraph, only the paragraph, any way we want on one sheet, and then again on the other sheet, trying to disguise our handwriting. You are committing forgery. The instructor left and we all started writing. When done, one student, not me, collected all the sheets, mixed them up, and took them to the instructor. We all looked forward to the next class where the instructor would present matched sheets, then explain to us why our forgery attempts failed, and how he would testify in court to prove it. Because I wanted to go home, I made it easy on myself. For my forgery attempt, I wrote the paragraph in print on one sheet and in cursive on the other sheet, even though we were told that it is a failed way to disguise handwriting. Now, for a little background on my handwriting, it's bad. I mean, really bad. And I have held pencils and pens wrong since I learned to write. The easiest way to explain it is, I write with a closed fist, right-handed. In elementary school, my parents hired a tutor to try to teach me how to write again from scratch, including putting plastic things on pencils to make my preferred grip uncomfortable. It failed miserably. In high school, I had a teacher tell me I would amount to nothing because I had issues writing legibly. Basically, my print is somewhat legible and my cursive, good luck. But that should make no difference. Now, back to the story. At the beginning of the next class, the normal, happy-go-lucky instructor looked very upset as he walked in. The first words out of his mouth was if anyone played a practical joke on him, he did not appreciate it. The whole class, 15 students, looked at each other totally confused. The instructor then again tried to get someone to confess, but we all continued to look confused. The instructor calmed down a little and decided to continue with the class as he normally would have done so. From the stack of papers he was handed at the end of the last class, he picked out the top 2 sheets and said in court speak how he deduced that the same person wrote both paragraphs. Then, a student would admit it was their failed forgery attempt, and the instructor would continue with the next 2 sheets. When there were just 2 sheets left, the instructor lifted them up for all the class to see. Looking straight at me, he said he could not testify in court, saying the same person wrote both paragraphs. With a scared look on my face, I said both sheets were mine, and I wrote both paragraphs. So, in front of the instructor and whole class, I again wrote the paragraph, once in print and once in cursive. The instructor walked away shaking his head and mumbling something like he had never seen this before. After that, the instructor looked at and spoke to me differently as my classmates created some obvious nicknames for me. The Forger. I got an A in the class and was very happy when it ended. Trying to anticipate some questions, exactly why I could do this, I have no idea. I figured if I was in school today, I would be diagnosed with some minor learning disability. No, I cannot demonstrate this now. I have not written in cursive in 40 plus years, and too old to relearn. Cursive, think loopy letters all connected together, which thankfully is being forgotten. I did make a new account for this post. In the 80s, I found a career that matched my handwriting skills, computers. OP added an edit down at the bottom. It says, I saw some debate on whether this is an actual malicious compliance. I thought it was in the realm, but if not, thanks to the admins for letting it stay up, even if I unintentionally strayed from the definition. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Squirreltail. It says, I had my checkbook stolen way back in 95 and was able to prove the signature wasn't mine because it was actually readable. Bastards wrote $300 of bad checks on a $100 account. I needed that money for foods. I remember as a kid looking at my parents' writing. My mother's writing was the neatest print you had ever seen, although I don't think I ever saw her do cursive. She was a teacher and her printing was absolutely perfect and still is to this day, and she's now in her mid-70s. My dad, on the other hand, if you can read that chicken scratch, you're a better person than me, because it is just unreadable. Which is really surprising to me because he was a business executive for many, many years, back before computers were really all over the place. So he would have done a lot of physically writing memos to other people in that business. It's amazing that anything got done there under his instruction. This story comes to us from Eldon42. Boss applies policy, employee gets mad, CEO rips employee a new one. Back in the early 2000s, I was working for a local council in New Zealand. If you're not aware, New Zealand has a central government and a series of local areas around cities or rural boundaries, each run by an elected mayor and council. The day-to-day business is, of course, done by employees in a typical business structure. One of the things about this is that all computer systems are regarded as being owned by the council, and kinda sorta by the populace. If a member of the public wants to see what's on the computers, they can make a request under the Official Information Act and see pretty much anything, except private data. Private data being defined by the Privacy Act as basically names, addresses, birth dates, phone numbers, etc. Also, working in the council offices was a small business that had an exclusive contract with the council. This group handled the more physical aspects of the council systems, maintenance of roads, sewer, and water systems, etc. If the council said, "We need a new pipe there," this small business made it happen. Thing is, the small business leased, this is important, their computers from the council. The small IT team, 3 people including me, built and supplied those machines. We owned the software that was on them, and they were connected to the internal council network. This meant they were subject to the same local government and council policies as the rest of us. Periodically, we in IT would clean out large files, early 2000s when storage was expensive, and we were limited due to budget, etc. Now, the staff were fully aware of this and knew to keep personal files to a minimum. If we, during a purge, found a large personal file, we could delete them at our discretion. During this time, we found some videos on an SB employee's machine. It was adult material, and not the nice kind of adult material either. The words fecal and mouth apply. Ugh. Because this violated council policy in oh so many ways, we deleted it quietly. The employee in question complained, claiming we had removed personal files. I never saw the videos happily, but my understanding is that he wasn't in them. They were stuff he had downloaded. We pointed at the policy. He went to the CEO and complained. The CEO came to us. My boss had figured this might happen. The employee in question was an interesting guy, and showed the CEO one of the videos, which was on the backups just in case we deleted something we shouldn't and had to restore it. We were good enough at our jobs that we never had to do that, but better safe than sorry. I wasn't there when it happened, but by all accounts, the CEO hauled the employee and the employee's boss of the SB, to an out-of-hearing location and ripped them a new one. The only reason the employee wasn't fired was because he technically worked for the SB and not the council. FYI, we would regularly block adult material sites, but being the early 2000s, new ones popped up all the time. Unless an employee tried to access them, we probably didn't know they existed. It's not that we were prudes, it's just that most staff weren't stupid enough to browse that stuff at work. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called MHKOHNE. I'm not going to try and pronounce that. It says, honestly, anyone dumb enough to complain about their adult material being deleted from a work computer should probably lose their job on the basis of being a freaking idiot. Yep, I completely understand that one. I worked at a company that leased out computers to people, and let me tell you, some of the stuff that came back on those computers, I don't even want to think about that. One in particular led to an investigation where the guy had all of his electronic devices taken away. That's something I will never be able to unsee, unfortunately. One thing dealing with computers and people who use them has taught me though is you never really know who you're dealing with, because some of the things we found on these computers, you just wouldn't think that that nice person who had that computer would be into that kind of freaky shit. This story comes to us from La Croissant. You want me to speedrun the game so you have someone to talk to? Fine. Originally posted on r/pettyrevenge, but then I realized it fit here too. I, 25 female, have a friend, 25, who's been wanting me to play Breath of the Wild for years now. It's not that I'm not interested in playing, heck, I bought the game ages ago, I've just been more invested in other things. After 5 or so years, I finally cracked down to play and absolutely love it. My friend is equally excited and can't wait for me to get to their favorite parts. No, literally, they can't wait. Almost daily, I'm hounded with DMs, asking how I like the game. Did I meet A yet? Have I done B yet? Have I finished C quest? Why is it taking so long for me to finish C quest? I prefer taking things on my own time. With a game of this scale, I want to take my sweet time exploring and finding things as I go. I feel like I'm progressing the plot at a decent pace, 50 hours into a game that other people have spent 300 on, and I'm doing fun side quests. Also, I have other hobbies and I've been playing the game along with the other things going on in my life. I've told them as much and they're not very happy about it. At first, they were supportive, if not a little pushy for me to play the game. When I'd talk about certain plot points and gameplay that I enjoyed, they'd brush off my gushing and say things along the lines of, "Oh, you haven't seen anything yet, you're not ready, keep going." As I juggled between the game's 2 main missions, they pushed me to do one over the other because it's where the good stuff happens. Despite me saying multiple times that I wanted to go at my own pace and do both missions together, they hounded me with more messages about how I wasn't playing right, and I need plot. I talked to them about it probably dozens of times, and they explained that they were so pushy because they needed someone else to talk about the game to. No, they wouldn't stop hounding me. I needed to keep going. For them, for our friendship. I'd thank them later. Speedrun. So I thought, to heck with it. They want me to speedrun? Then I'll speedrun. I used guides and read up things to finish the game as quickly as I could. I honestly have no clue what I did or how I finished, but I did. I eventually sent them a screen cap of my finished game file and gave them my honest opinion. I hated it. There was no build up to anything. I didn't know any character well enough to be invested in their struggles. And the puzzles ranged from stupidly easy to unnecessarily complicated. That part of the game that they couldn't wait for me to find skipped over the dialogue. It wasn't worth the extra time. After all, I needed to finish the game as soon as possible, right? Needless to say, we're not friends anymore. Now that I've returned to my original save file and am playing how I want, I can say that Breath of the Wild is one of the best games I've played. Since I skipped over so much for the sake of being petty, a lot of things still feel like new. I have no shortage of other friends to talk about the game with, and thankfully, these ones encourage me to take my time. They can't wait for me to get to their favorite parts. But not literally. They'll wait however long it takes me. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called LSP4Brad. It says, BOTW is probably my favorite game of all time, and I think it was specifically designed to be played slowly. You're supposed to discover things by accident and make mistakes and try again. Glad you are getting to enjoy the game as it was intended. I completely understand this one. There's some games that I started playing a lot later than my friends. They already had a couple 100 hours in, and then I got into it. And you feel pressured to get to the level that they're at as quickly as possible so you can actually play the games together. But my friends were never really pushy about it. It was just my feeling that I needed to catch up. It had nothing to do with them. I couldn't imagine being pushed by my friends to get to their level, to do things at a pace that was good for them and not good for me. It sounds like that person wouldn't really be a friend anymore. So I can understand why OP ditched that friend and moved on their own. And I'm glad they found other people playing the game that think that it's great that OP wants to go at their own pace. This story comes to us from HuffPuff92. Buy a new one or go home. I used to work at Sonic as a car hop. I usually worked 4 to 5 to close. One day, I was cleaning up all the drinks the day shift left around, and I found a can of Monster. I grabbed it and walked around and asked everybody who was working. The manager, Robert, like normal, was talking to his girlfriend on the phone. assuming based off of all the adult talk. When I asked if it was his, he looked right at me, shook his head, and turned away without saying anything. After I finished asking everybody else, I dumped it out and threw it away. 30 to 45 minutes later, he comes up front and went to throw away his trash and seen it in the trash. He was livid, started screaming, grabbing it out of the trash, and started shoving it in people's face, asking if they threw it away. I told him they didn't, I did. He cornered me against the wall and screamed in my face that I was going to leave and go buy him a new one. Two things, the monster was probably half full, if that, and I hate being yelled at. And I asked him. We got into this huge fight about it, him demanding I replace it, me telling him to F off. This went on for 2 hours. It was slow because it was winter, so he sent everybody else home. He was cooking. Finally, he told me I was either going to go buy a new one or I was going to go home. It was 7 at this point. We closed at midnight. I grabbed my stuff and went and clocked out. He said if I didn't go get him a new drink, I was fired. I said, okay, see you never. Not even 5 minutes after I left, the GM, Jeremy, called me asking why I left. So I told him what happened. He said the other manager can't fire me as only the GM can, and asked me to go back and finish the shift. I told him that I couldn't do that with Robert yelling in my face like that I'd go back tomorrow. So Robert was effed the rest of the night. Nobody else, not even Jeremy, would come in. He had to cook and run orders for 5 hours by himself. Pissed a lot of customers off. And when I went in the next night, he asked why I was back since he fired me, and it was a joy to tell him he couldn't do that. He held a grudge for 3 whole months. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Prof1959. It says, can't believe the GM didn't have a chat with Robert about it, saving you the months of grudges, but okay. OP responded to this one and said, laugh out loud, GM was very non-confrontational. He had me on video running out of the building, my ex chasing me while trying to button up his pants, and my best friend and another car hop following us. We all worked there, and I came up to surprise them one night. They were closing, and I was the one surprised by them having relations in the walk-in. Jeremy asked me what happened a few days later and was very awkward about it. Said he could say something to them if I wanted him to, but he really preferred not to. Okay, my question here is, what good is a GM that's non-confrontational? I mean, that's kind of part of the definition of that job. The GM has to deal with things that kind of require confrontation. Both this GM and the manager just seem like they might have gotten promoted because, they were there for a really long time, but they don't really have the skills they need to, do the jobs that they were promoted into. Unfortunately, that happens in a lot of companies. This story comes to us from FrostDragon57. I'm not authorized to go get water? Alright. Now, before I start, here's a bit of context for this situation. I work in the boat industry as an engine tech and parts painter. I know, quite a broad range right there. Anyway, the company I work for is quite old, and the building I work in is even older. The heating system is trash, and we really lack anything in the way of air conditioning. And it's boiling outside right now. Earlier today, I had started overheating really quickly as the temperature rose in the building. I have a medical condition where my body can't regulate temperature well, meaning I am at risk of passing out. I was going to go get a bottle of water from the fridge to help me cool down when I was stopped by one of the company's managers. Let's call him Kyle for this story. Where are you going? I was only going to get some water. You're supposed to be working right now. You can get the water during the coffee break. I don't think you understand that I can actually be in danger from this heat right now. So could I please go get one bottle of water? No, you're not authorized to leave your work before the clock strikes. Now shut up and get back to work. Roger that. Keep in mind that this conversation was held in front of my coworkers. Cue malicious compliance. I got back to work, making sure to put on some extra coal, just to make sure I made up for lost time. Basically, I was forcing my body into shock, and heat stroke was just around the corner. Fast forward around 30 minutes, I had to tell my coworkers through my strained breath that I don't feel too good, which was actually even worse now, as I was working on deck of one of these boats, give or take 3 meters above the floor. When I made my way towards the ladder to climb down, I only got out a very strained "oh crap" as I fell off the back and was headed straight for the concrete floor below me. Lucky for me, some coworkers reacted fast enough and managed to catch me before my head was split open on the floor. I woke up in an ambulance around an hour later. The EMTs were checking my vitals and were actually helping me. My boss came up to the door and asked me what happened. I told him exactly as I told you guys, and I also told him to check with my coworkers if he didn't believe me. Long story boring, I was brought to the hospital for a checkup just to make sure I actually didn't suffer any kind of trauma from the fall. A buddy of mine came with me to make sure I got there and back safe. A few hours passed and my buddy got a call. He picked it up and it was Kyle. My buddy handed me the phone and I heard Kyle on the other end apologizing for actually almost getting me killed. The short version is that he was heavily reprimanded for what he told me and was put on watch. Didn't lose his position though, so I guess I didn't fully win, but he was liable for the medical compensation for my situation. I did forgive him, and just to rub it in a bit, I just had to ask him, am I authorized to get water next time? And my buddy just laughed. OP added an edit at the bottom of this one. It says, edit, I already got OSHA on the line and they're launching an investigation into this, so if nothing else, I just made Kyle's week even more horrible. Also, for those who wondered, Kyle is pretty new and is basically a bit of a brick. Can I call him that? Whatever. He's round around the edges and generally doesn't believe people when it comes to their personal health. He's got that kind of, if you can talk, then you can work mentality. So in a way, he kinda deserved this. OSHA will have a field day with his actions. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called TJamesV. It says, your answer should have been, I don't need authorization. Denying an employee the right to drink water is illegal and dangerous. I guess with Kyle being new, he didn't know that that's actually an OSHA requirement that employees have access to water and time to drink the water. I'm guessing that OP was pretty young when this happened because I don't think somebody who was older would make the same decision that OP did. You only get one life, and if OP had fallen off of the back of that boat the wrong way, cracked their neck or their back, their life would have been changed forever. So when the initial confrontation with Kyle happened, OP should have just said, yeah, I'm gonna go get that water, and if you need to write me up, by all means, write me up. I will talk to the labor board. There really is no point just trying to make a point when it could cause irreparable damage to your body. Well, wouldn't you know it, the OP from the previous story did post an update. It says, update, I'm not allowed to get water? Okay. First of all, hello again, I'm the idiot that almost died to prove a point. Before I continue, to all of you who were concerned about my safety and health, thank you. I never realized how many would care. I'd also like to apologize for literally putting my own life in danger to prove a point. It was stupid. My family, the nurses, my girlfriend, and many of you made me realize just how stupid I was, and I will be more careful in the future. I am now out of the hospital after being completely stabilized, and I don't have any major trauma from this ordeal, so don't worry. Anyway, for those of you not in the loop, check my profile for the previous post. For those of you who already know, let's get into this. A lot of things happened so far. My aunt, the main nurse assigned to me, and the nurses I knew personally all cussed me out for what I did, and told me to make sure I better get health and safety to invade my job for this. My aunt put me in contact with a representative, and I had a lengthy chat with said representative. This got the ball rolling for investigations to start. What I didn't expect was that even police had to get involved. I was released from the hospital after a day and was told that I could work, but I was entitled to 10-minute breaks every hour if the temperature rose above 25 degrees Celsius indoors, which basically is every hour of the day. Anyway, I clocked in today and was immediately approached by some man and woman in high-vis and hard hats. The woman introduced herself as the representative I had spoken to on the phone, and she basically asked me to backtrack and explain in detail what happened. I did, and she wrote everything down and let me be on my way, after reminding me to abuse my medical papers as much as I felt like. Dunno why. She just said that and walked away. Didn't hear much more after that. The entire company was called into a large meeting about personal safety, and it was quickly established that I was the cause of said safety meeting. Whoops. Anyway, we were informed that Kyle, the dillweed manager, had been demoted to a normal worker, and that we would be entitled to 5-minute breaks every hour due to the heat. Nice. He also said that, due to the heat, the company would be purchasing drink coolers, fans, and would be compensating any worker that had to go home due to illness prompted by the heat. This part, though, shocked me. Frost is not allowed in any engine bay until winter due to temperatures in there being close to a sauna. We don't need him to almost die twice to understand his condition is severe. Basically, anywhere the heat rises above 30 degrees Celsius, I am not allowed in for my own safety. That's as far as this situation has come. Once again, to those who were worried about me, thank you. And I'm sorry for making you worry about someone like me. Thank you for your time. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Double-Breasted Burb. It says, former EHS here used to oversee foundries. We do not F around with heat. Powerade and water stations everywhere. I even bought a handful of freezers and would dump ices and ice cream bars in them all the time. Every worker we had knew they could opt to go take some time anytime they needed it. When you have a facility pushing 110 plus inside, even with all the swamp fans on high, you need it. OP, don't do that again. I think it's pretty fair to say that OP learned their lesson here. This was a great update and basically confirmed that OP's not going to be that dumb again. Well, I hope not anyway. I don't think that Kyle really got what he deserved though. I think he should have been fired because he basically caused a workplace accident that resulted in the injury of an employee. Yeah, get your stuff and there's the door. Bye-bye. This story comes to us from Dramatic But Aware. You want to know where I am at all times? Your wish is my command. I've been lurking on this sub for a hot minute, and I saw a post that reminded me of my own malicious compliance story. This happened about 8 years ago, 1 year into just my first job, paid internship, clerking gig, I don't know what to call it. The firm that I worked for had a part-time program for law students so they could work and gain experience while in school. Very common in my country. I loved my job. I was very grateful for the opportunity to learn and grow, and I really enjoyed the work I performed. The thing was, I had classes both in the morning and the afternoon night, and my school was at a different side of the city, about 8 miles away, that could turn into hours of traffic during rush hour in a city with 8 million inhabitants. So my days looked pretty hectic, as something like this. 5:30 to 7, get ready and drive to school. 7 to 9, class. 9 to 10-ish, drive to work. 10-ish to 1700, work. 1700 to 1800, drive to school. 1800 to 2200, classes. Then I would try to study for 1 hour after class, and I would often eat while driving. During my first year in the program, I had more than proved myself and earned my place. I was that 19, 20-year-old idiot, type A overachiever that knew no boundaries. I had worked weekends, pulled all-nighters. Literally, I would leave school at 10 effing p.m. and go back to work. Worked full-time in the summers without more pay. Anything I had to do to keep the associates happy so they'd keep teaching me. As I was wrapping my first anniversary there, the perfect storm of awful rolled around. On the academic front, I started a new semester, and twice a week in the mornings, I had a teacher who was awesome, but would finish class 20 to 30 minutes late. on the work front, a new partner joined the firm, let's call him Mr. Butthole, and kind of took over as unofficial managing partner. He was the typical old-fashioned lawyer that should be extinct by now. He could barely use Microsoft Word to type a contract, and would pass out at the sight of an Excel sheet. He had this weird obsession with punctuality while simultaneously being late to everything. Plus, he moronically believed that by having a bunch of people warming up chairs, he would magically make money. So instead of investing time on client development, he would just spend endless time and effort on bullying everyone around the office. To make matters worse, since other people spoke highly of me, he decided to pay special attention to me. Unsurprisingly, shortly after Butthole joined, the firm started struggling. Now, he could have tried to get new clients, send quotes by the deadline, and show up to meetings on time, but no, of course, the firm was doing poorly because us clerks did not spend enough time warming up the chairs. So he became obsessed with us getting there by 10 a.m., especially me. The issue was that I could not get there by 10 because my teacher finished class late, and there was no way I could drive across the city in rush hour in 30 minutes. So Butthole called a meeting with all the clerks and yelled at me in front of everyone because I was always late. More like 2 times a week, but whatever. The fact that I had gotten permission from the program committee did not matter. The fact that I was working 6 or 7 hours every day while I only had to work 5 did not matter. The fact that I would work weekends and late nights did not matter. I tried to explain, but he kept yelling at me and would not let me talk. Having had enough, I left the conference room straight into the office of every member of the clerk program committee, 1 junior associate, 1 senior associate, and 1 partner, to say the same speech. I am late because I have class. I have proven my commitment to the firm, but my education is important too. If 30 minutes late twice a week is too big of an issue, feel free to fire me, but I am not leaving class early. Then went to my desk to do my work. I guess the committee informed other partners and word got around of what was going on, small firm, because as I was getting ready to leave for school, Butthole came fuming to my desk and told me, "I know that you are lying. From now on, I want to know where you are at all times, and if I catch that you were slacking off or lying, you are fired, and I will make sure no one will ever hire you." So, cue malicious compliance. The next day, I woke up extra early, 5 a.m. sharp, took a timestamp photo, and sent it to both his email and phone, since I could not risk him not getting it, and him not knowing where I was. I sent a timestamp photo every 5 minutes, captioning what I was doing like it was my own personal social media platform of 1 follower. The cherry on top was that my teacher had worked with Butthole in the past, and obviously did not like him very much, so he let me take photos during the class and diligently send them to Butthole. I even went as far as taking a photo of the toilet door with the text "peeing" and then at the toilet flushing, all done. While driving, since traffic was really slow, I would send a photo and include how much I had moved during that time. Sometimes it was something absurd like 100 feet. As soon as I sent a photo of me at my desk, he shows up saying that he got the point and I could stop. A couple weeks later, he simply stopped bugging people and started working from home or locking himself up in his office. My guess is I was not the only one to complain, and the other partner realized how dangerous he could be for the firm and asked him to back off. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Kinsfire. It says, "I have to admit that I'd have asked, can I have it in writing that I can stop telling you where I am? I don't want this coming back to bite me later." And I loved how the firm went, "He's dangerous, we'll ask him to back off," rather than, "He's dangerous, we need to fire him." Means that they actually support his idiocy, but realized that you might be able to build a lawsuit against them and Butthole if he kept it up. I find the end of this story and that comment very interesting because he was just asked to back off. He wasn't fired, just asked to back off. I'm guessing that he has some worth to the company. Either he's directly connected to somebody who helps the company, be it politically or in the legal world, Or he's got something on the other partner, which is definitely a possibility. This story comes to us from NoLanguage7256, How I Managed My First Micromanager. Back in 2010, I was working in a training management area within a government department. The job was fairly easy for me. When my original supervisor went on extended leave, I got a new supervisor that we will call Agatha. Almost immediately, Agatha started to micromanage me, even though she didn't really know my job that well, or even half of what my role entailed. Now, I will say that I didn't particularly like Agatha as a person, but I tried to get along with her, even when her management style started to show. In hindsight, I should have worked some internal politics to be removed from the area, but hey, no one said I was smart at 19. The section started to have some underlying tension, until one day she called me into a meeting and, long convo cut short, she said the magic words, "You need to do what I tell you to do, and not what you think you need to do." She even followed it up by emailing me words to the same effect. Now, I did two things on the heels of that meeting. Firstly, I printed out the email to keep in my bag, drawer, pocket, and on my wall. Secondly, I started to do what she said, and only what she said. At first, she would just tell me the jobs that needed completing, but she only got worse when she noticed the work wasn't getting done and started to tell me how to do things. Again, I complied and only did exactly what she told me and how she told me to do it. If she missed a step in her instructions, I would either skip it if I could move on, or ask her to explain again, as I couldn't figure it out. I was a darn good employee. I even went out of my way to start asking her what I should be doing and how, after every task. If she wasn't in the area, which was very common, I would just wait for her to come back. If she wanted to micromanage me, I would make her work for it. She was getting nothing done. We were getting further and further behind. This went on for about a month. The reputation of our section was tanking internally and externally. Enter Michelle, Agatha's boss. She noticed all my questions and the general drop in productivity, morale, and reputation. She pulled me aside and asked me what was happening, considering I am normally so competent and efficient, and don't ask many questions about how to do the work. Small aside, Michelle was a fantastic boss and generally preferred a more hands-off approach when she could. She clearly was giving Agatha enough rope to either make a ladder or something else. Okay, back to the story. I explained to Michelle how Agatha was managing me and I was just trying to help her management style by leaning into it. I also showed her Agatha's email. At this point, I estimated I could get everything caught up in about a week without working any extended hours if things changed. Michelle, being a good boss, simply asked what it would take for me to go back to working the way I always have. I only asked to not be managed by Agatha anymore. I could have been much more insidious with my request, but I only wanted to be left alone to do my work. To my surprise, it worked. I immediately started reporting directly to Michelle. I got the work caught up in 3 days, surpassing even my own expectations. As for Agatha, she started to have her work examined a lot more closely, including her overall output since, I found out later, she was trying to blame me for her low work output. It turned out that I was in fact the solution. Michelle ended up sharing Agatha's workload between the two of us, and we didn't really notice much difference. Agatha, however, did notice a difference, as she was shuffled into another area of the department. One with a lot less responsibility, and a whole heck of a lot less promotion opportunity. I ran into Agatha again after I had moved around the country a few times. I ended up back in the same office, but a different section. Agatha was still in the same crappy position, same level too. Her personal reputation was so bad that only a handful of people would actually work with her. It felt good to know how stuck she was, and presumably still is. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Yankee Walrus. It says, "The ingenuity of some people impresses me. Michelle gave Agatha some rope, and Agatha somehow used it to make a shovel and dig herself into a hole. See, the problem here is that people like Agatha are going to keep on digging that hole, thinking that they might come out the other side at some point. But that's just not going to happen because we all know you can keep digging down as far as you want, you're not gonna get anywhere. Yeah, micromanaging bosses really suck, and the bosses that are the big fish in the little pond, they suck as well. And I think there's nothing more fitting to put in here than screw you, Rick. And those of you who have been listening for a long time, you'll know why. This story comes to us from Andrew Hester 666. Work on small freight first? Alrighty. So I used to work at a home improvement retailer that's popular in the Midwest United States. Nothing bad against the company other than the simple fact it's retail and my fair share of customer stories. But today, this story is about my assistant manager at the time. At the time of this story, I was working as a morning stalker with two other guys and was their senior in seniority despite having only been with the company and store for 6 months, and the older gentleman was the down stalker, took excess product on the top shelf and put it on the store shelves, was a freaking retired aviation engineer who just got bored of retirement and wanted something active. Kind of important to note. Our department manager, who was my first and absolute best manager, had a policy or rule, call it what you will, where us stalkers would put away the heavy bulk items that can be taken off the pallets and thrown onto the shelves without unwrapping anything. Think pet food, cat litter, 5-gallon, 20-liter buckets of paint, etc. Yes, I know, weird combo, but that was what our department did, paint and grocery. And we would work through the bulk items, working our way down to the smaller items until we got to the smallest items, like theater box candy. One morning, we come into work on this particularly fine Friday morning where the manager had the day off, and it was the assistant manager for that morning, as well as the whole weekend. Managers alternated working on weekends, a reason I refused a management position. And it was this day that she felt she needed to up her game or something because she told us in the morning note to us stalkers that we needed to work on the smaller items first and work our way up to the larger items. We all exchanged looks and knew this was a bad idea. So I told them to just do the normal stuff and I'd ask her when she came in an hour and a half later at 6:30 a.m. She came in and fortunately for us, me and the other stalker had finished our perspective pallets, while the down stalker was just working the usual rounds, walking up and down the ladder. I asked her if she really wanted to proceed with this line of process as there were 10 pallets in the receiving area for our department, and 6 of them were bulk items we could have done in less than an hour. And one of the reasons we stalkers did the bulk items, as our manager would jokingly put it, he didn't want the sales team to smell like crap. Which makes sense if you ask me, cause I've smelt myself on the way home after working bulk freight all day. But I digress. But she was adamant that we did the small piddly stuff so the sales team could focus on making sales and other more important tasks. One thing I failed to mention is that it was thunderstorming this Friday, which is a good day to me as I might as well live in Seattle or other places where it rains a lot, which causes sales to drop dramatically at our store given its location of our city, as only contractors don't give a hoot about weather. Without skipping a beat, the other stalker and I nodded our heads, and when the assistant manager wasn't looking, I grabbed the note she left for us from the recycling box we had to use for later as I knew where this was going after how the day was going. To make an already long story not so long, the story repeated itself on Saturday, but rather than do a couple bulk items in the hour and a half we had before the assistant manager came in, we complied and did the small items like candy, off-the-shelf meds like aspirin, and other small pain-in-the-butt items. We got maybe 7 pallets of freight out on Friday, 4 of them being bulk, 2 on that Saturday, despite another 15 pallets coming in. Stalkers didn't work on Sundays. Us stalkers would work from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. and it was Monday morning when the managers would switch places, so the department manager would be in at noon that day, and it was at about 8:30 a.m. when the assistant manager realized how bad she messed up, as we had over 10 pallets in the back aisle. But receiving was packed with another 20 to 30, with over 20 of these pallets being bulk items we'd have had done easily. Being friends with several people on sales, we came to find out she told none of the salespeople to work on freight, and would even tell the ones who would work on freight when their daily tasks were done to work on something else, like straightening the shelves and whatnot. I also found out from friends in receiving that there were 2 more trucks coming in that day, which caused me and the other stalkers to giggle a bit. At about 8:30, the assistant manager told us, including the nice 67-year-old downstalker, to start working bulk freight to get as much out. Thing was, I had class at 10 a.m. and needed to go home to shower so I didn't smell bad, and the downstalker smirked and told the other stalker that we were going to leave on time with him and the other stalker, coming up with their own reasons for having to leave on time, that I don't remember what they said as a reason. Coming that Tuesday, the department manager's note to us told us to work on nothing but bulk freight, and that he wanted to talk to me specifically when he came in at 6:30. Soon as he came in and before he could say a word to ask what happened, I took the papers the assistant manager gave us those 2 days and placed them in front of him. If disappointed anger could kill, then his flared nostril deep breath and exhale would have killed this city, as his eyes rolled back and he shook his head before laughing, before bringing the other stalker over and telling us whoever got the most pallets done would get $20. Sad to say, I didn't win, but I did get a second place $10 bill. As I said, he was the best manager I ever had so far. And before it's asked, we got 25 pallets done between us in those 2.5 hours. I did 12, the other stalker did 13, and we joke he won because he took the last bulk pallet. Best part was the manager thanking us, handing us our winnings, then telling us at 9 to go home and shower because we smell like crap. We still laugh about it to this day. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called MM800. It says, "Never manage people who don't need to be managed." OP responded to this one. It says, "So thankful to have worked with that downstalker to learn little things like getting things in writing. Probably wouldn't have grabbed the morning notes otherwise, though probably could have picked them out of the recycling box as it wasn't even half full yet." Yep, this is exactly it. Document, document, document. And, well, when they document something for you, make sure you keep a copy of it because that could get you out of a bind in the future. Some managers, especially new ones, think that they have to manage every little part of what's going on. The good ones that have been around for a while will sit back and see what's working and not mess with it. Then they'll try to optimize the parts that aren't working. This manager in this story obviously was not in that mindset. This story comes to us from Renaissance Fartist, and this little person right here sums up exactly how I feel about that name. "I haven't had a sick day in 9 years. For reference, this takes place around 2017, so definitely pre-COVID. I used to work in a training center for a Fortune 500 company. When class wasn't in session, the building normally only had 4 people in it: me, trainee, the boss, and the 2 trainers. I called in sick 2 days in a row because I had some nasty lung infection. On the second day, the boss starts ranting at me about how kids these days have no discipline, and I haven't taken a sick day in 9 years. I tried asking if he wanted me to get a doctor's note, but he was pretty adamant about me coming in the next day. He said that he can decide if I'm actually sick, and he can send me home. I was one of the few women working in that section of the company, less than half everyone's age, and felt like arguing with him about it was a bad idea. Cue malicious compliance. That next morning, I decide to not pump myself full of cold meds and just go in raw dogging life. As soon as I walk in the door, the trainers look at me and I say, "I'm very sick, might want to give me a wide berth." They looked at me wide-eyed, nodded, and went to a different section of the building. The boss hears me coughing so hard I'm having to do that gasp for air like I just emerged from the depths. He walks in and goes, "Oh, you really are sick. You should go home, but I don't understand how you got this sick," and then reminds me, I haven't taken a sick day in 9 years. So I drive home and come back in the next day. The trainers look at me and say, "What the heck are you doing here?" The boss said that if I'm actually sick, he can send me home. They laughed and avoided my section of the building. The boss once again hears me coughing and gasping for air and comes in and dismisses me. and this time tells me that he doesn't need more proof. I can come back when I feel better. 4 days later, Mr. I haven't taken a sick day in 9 years was sick with some nasty lung nonsense and was out for a week. If only he had more discipline. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called King Penguins. It says, tell him to come in and you can send him home if he's actually sick. If only it worked that way and you could actually talk that way to your boss without getting fired. I mean, this person already seems like they have a really short fuse. So do you really want to light that fuse and set him off even more than he normally is? Ugh. Mind you, OP, I think it's time for you to find a different place to work, because that manager's a giant dick. Kind of reminds me of my previous manager. Screw you, Rick. This story comes to us from Tama Best. Boss firing me without a warning and effing up the termination. I worked for a small company for the last 2 years as a software developer. And with small, I mean that I was the only employee. So for many projects my boss had, I wrote the main part of the code base. In March, I made a mistake in one of the updates, and from then on, my boss made it a habit to yell at me at least once every day, and tell me how stupid I am. Additionally, he started to call me outside of my working hours to demand fixes for problems that at the most part were his own mistakes. To be fair, my code quality started to go downhill after I had several mental breakdowns thanks to behavior. At the start of May, he said to me that he doesn't want to fire me, but would recommend that I find another job in the next month. So I applied to several companies and was waiting for the responses when he decided to terminate me nonetheless 2 weeks later. He wrote a termination letter and sent it to my home address, but didn't say a word to me. So I was quite shocked when I received the letter which stated that I was fired starting July the 1st and that I should take my remaining 20 vacation days, which is the rest of my annual leave in June. But in Germany, where I work, the employer is only obliged to give you the rest of your annual leave if you worked more than 6 months in the company for this year. Additionally, an important project, which I had been working on since February, was due in mid-June, and not even close to finished, because my boss had prioritized tickets from other projects. So I wrote my boss that I would like to take the vacation days immediately, as written in the termination. But if he needed help for finishing the current project, I would be willing to have the remaining vacation days be paid out to me. As soon as I sent the message, I saw in the chat program that he was typing. He answered that the number of vacation days in the letter of termination was a minor spelling mistake, and that I only had 6 days left. After a quick chat with an attorney, friend of my parents, who started laughing when I told him of my boss's reaction, I wrote my boss a formal mail, in which I informed him that I would definitely take the vacation days as stated in the letter, and because the termination also stated that the remaining vacation time will not be paid out, I will withdraw the regarding offer. The next week, he grudgingly accepted the 20 vacation days, and I will never forget the expression of defeat in his face at the last day when he realized that the project he took a loan for was about to phenomenally fail. Because I was the only one working on it, and he didn't even try to understand how it works. His slogan always was, as long as it works, I don't care. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Ilmayo. It says, I don't understand how he would think the company can carry on, having fired the only employee he has. OP responded to this comment and said, to be honest, I think he could not afford me any longer. He had to declare bankruptcy for the first time half a year after I started at his company, and I have a gut feeling he's running out of money. I love that statement. As long as it works, I don't care. Anybody else here heard of FAFO, F around and find out? Because those two statements are pretty much the same thing. As long as it works, I don't care. I'm gonna F around and find out. I guess another thing here is that it's kind of common in business to have, another person that can do the job as well, and not just relying on one person. Because what if something happens to that person? What if that person's out sick for a few weeks? What happens if that person dies? What happens if that person just says, screw you, I'm going to a new job? You have nothing to fall back on. This business owner very obviously didn't plan for anything. This story comes to us from Hot Wallaby 6402. Management thought they didn't need me. Turns out they decided to try and sue me. I was reminded of this story, so I figured I'd share, but I'm going to be intentionally vague with the industry for privacy reasons. My post history won't help here, laugh out loud. Now, for some context, this company wasn't new. They had been around for about a decade before I was hired. And as far as I know, they're still around, but not sure how they're doing now. When I started there, it was only about 60-ish employees, which 15 to 20 were just hourly wage nobodies like me. I just had the luck of the draw that my team had 4 managers over my area. I was in a role that wasn't supposed to have any management elements, but turns out not long after I started, 3 out of the 4 of the management team moved on, and I slowly took over some of their responsibilities. After about 6 months, I was starting to feel overworked, and I went job hunting. Having listed the responsibility I had with this position got me a management role somewhere else with substantially higher pay. I even got them to let me have a month before starting because I wanted to give a longer notice than 2 weeks to be nice. After I had given my 1-month notice, they were very dismissive of me leaving and acted like it wasn't a big deal. They thought they could spread out what I did among the other management teams. They were so certain that they could handle my job description of responsibilities that they even told me in writing they didn't need a transition period or training and didn't want an exit interview. They even offered me a week early leave with pay because they just thought it was handled and that I was useless. Before that week was out, I was getting calls, texts, and emails from higher-ups and HR trying to tell me that I'm contractually obligated to help them transition, and that if I didn't, that they would sue me for breach of contract. Now, the best part of this is that when I was hired, I was simply an hourly employee with no special contract, besides the standard employee agreement for hourly workers. But since I had started doing management-level work, everyone had assumed that I was made to sign the management contract, which had clause in it that required management to work past their notice if the company requested it, for handover training or anything the person was working on that couldn't be finished by anyone else. So within a week, they were frantically trying to get me to help them, and I had already started working with my new company half a week early, so I was ignoring their calls, texts, and emails because I was diving headfirst into my new role. Well, even after the threats, I thought they would have figured out that I didn't sign that contract. About another week later, I was served papers at my new office, and it shocked me, honestly. I read over the paperwork, and they were suing me for breach of contract, and it listed a law firm on it, obviously. So I decided to call them up and ask them if they had a signed contract, and I was laughed off the phone by the law office clerk. I realized I shouldn't have called them and should have gotten my own lawyer. Just 3 days later, I received a certified letter from the law firm with an official apology for being served and had official documentation showing they dropped the lawsuit, and apparently they dropped that company as a client for unethical practices. I never got another text, call, or email from anyone at that company or law firm. It felt nice that I shut down a lawsuit with a single question. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Dareboosh. It says, "Have you considered the idea that the clerk wasn't laughing at you, but instead was laughing because she knew the client had made a mistake? It's pretty clear she took you seriously because you heard back from them quickly." That's exactly what I was thinking for this story. They weren't laughing at OP, they were laughing with OP. And the fact that the law firm dropped them as a client leads me to believe that there was a lot more going on there, and this was just the icing on the cake, or the straw that broke the camel's back, as it were. The laugh kinda seals that in as well, because maybe the law clerk knew that this was going to be the one that got rid of that pesky client that they didn't want to have anymore. Do you know what periods are? Holy crap, my god, these sentences. Oh my gosh. Why? Why are these sentences so long? This story comes to us from MD Lapla. Professor is forced to a speech, complies to the max. Back when I was in high school, a long time ago, Whenever an important date approached, Independence Day, etc., we would line up in the courtyard and would have to be standing still, as in formation, and one of the teachers would do a speech about the date and the importance of it. Those speeches would usually be around 10 to 15 minutes long, about as long as it was humanly possible to keep 150 teenagers lined up and standing still on formation and listening, and the teacher doing the speech would rotate amongst all the faculty, and since there were quite a few teachers, each teacher was due around once a year or less than that. There was one notable omission on the teacher's roster. The mechanography teacher, this would age the post really well I guess, never did a speech. Never. Let's call him Mech. He would always refuse and get away with it for whatever reason. In around 30 or so years teaching at the school, it became famous that he never did a speech. Until this one day when I guess the dean got out of bed on his wrong foot or whatever, and he absolutely demanded Mech to do the speech. There was no way to get away with it. Mech would have to do it. His first speech in 30 or so years at the school. Even some of the faculty, former students of Mech themselves, were excited to see the outcome of this power struggle between Mech and the dean. So we lined up at the courtyard, 150 students, 15 to 20 teachers, etc., etc. And Mech took the stand and the mic with, definitely, a smirk of malicious compliance in his face. And he delivered. More than 45 minutes of an absolutely drowsing speech, telling every single minute detail and fact about the date in question. For the students, it was destruction, having to stand still and silent for almost an hour. Failing to do so was one of the most punishable offenses, trying not to fall asleep on our feet. The dean tried to stop Mech twice. The first time, Mech just completely ignored the dean. The second time, Mech just plainly told the dean, "You wanted me to do the speech? Deal with it," for the whole audience to listen. Around 30 to 35 minutes, some of the older, I don't give an F anymore students started shouting things at Mech. Not hurtful things, but colorful commentaries about the speech. We started laughing. Mech carried on as if nothing happened. Dean tried to take the stand to demand silence. Mech denied the dean, saying, "I'm not finished yet." That day, we lost probably 1.5 hours of teaching time. We ended up hating Mech for the torture he put us through. When he finished, the dean had no choice but to give us a short, unscheduled break before returning to class. Over the years, I realized what an absolute masterpiece of malicious compliance Mech delivered. Mech never did a speech again at the school. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Bouquet of Dogs. It says, "Well, at least he made sure he only had to do the speech once. Definitely worthwhile putting in some effort, laugh out loud." By the way, what kind of punishment would one of the most punishable offenses consist of? I'm not sure if I really want to know, but I'm too darn curious. OP responded to this one and said, "The school had a point system for punishment. You would get like yellow cards that had a number of points. So a minor offense might be no points up to 1 to 2 points. The most they ever gave on a single punishment was usually 5. There were probably exceptionally bad behaviors that tallied more, I don't remember. Disrespecting or misbehaving during one of these situations was usually 5. 15 points and you failed the year. The whole year. Okay, number 1, Professor Mech is an awesome person. They pulled off some great malicious compliance with that extra long speech. Very well done. OP, this school seems really strict. And I did read a little bit further down into the comments on this one and found out that OP went to an all-male Christian school, so that makes a little bit more sense now. This story comes to us from Savage Jimmy 85. All orders must be connected within 3 days or escalate? Sure thing, boss. I used to manage the activations department for an ISP. I wouldn't say I managed the team, as my style is they worked with me, not for me. I was simply the department's leader. For some context, the company had been growing for quite some time, but unfortunately not hiring enough staff to cover the growth. I started in the support department before being moved to this position after the entire old activations team quit. Due to the small world it is in the ISP space in my country, I'll keep things a little vague. Some background is required. The old team of 3 plus the manager used to have one person work on the oldest tickets in their queue, plus 2 on the newest tickets to keep things moving, being interrupted by calls, walk-ups, and messages. The manager would handle billing and cancellations. The same ticket would often get handled by multiple agents in a day, often the same agent multiple times too. Almost every day they were all doing unpaid overtime. We're all salaried employees, to handle the spillover from support throughout the night. When they quit, they had about 1,000 order tickets. Complaints were common but not outrageous. I knew that was unsustainable given the growth and acquisitions. By the time this story is relevant, we had over 3,000 tickets and almost no complaints with the same number of less experienced staff. To put that number in a little more perspective, that was 2 to 3 times as many tickets as every other department combined. We made many changes over the time, and I became an expert in the back end of the ticketing system. But the biggest change was we changed our workflow to a priority system, and everything now had a due date. All new tickets had a due date of the day they came in. If the customer wanted their connection on a different date and the pre-check showed no tech was required, that became the new due date. If a tech was needed, the appointment became the due date. If the customer emailed us against their ticket or any update happened to the ticket, the due date changed automatically from whatever it was to today, so we could be across the developments, as customer request dates and tech dates could be months into the future. Suddenly, the age of the ticket didn't matter, just the due date, and this reduced so much double handling, and customer updates were responded to quickly, and calls dropped significantly. Now, stick with me as all of this becomes relevant. My priorities were handle the cancellations and billing. When done, I followed the same priority as the team unless I was in meetings. The team's priorities were, oversimplified, 1. Get new orders and relocations vetted, text booked, and set applicable due dates. 2. Activate the completed orders or update the customer, tech, and due date if there were issues. 3. Important. Escalate overdue orders and follow up escalations, due date. 4. Activate voice orders. 5. Finally, everything else that was due today. It became a well-oiled machine. The escalations were maybe 0.5 to 1% of our orders. As we had so few complaints and typically raving positive reviews from our customers, the general manager didn't really understand how we worked or the depth of the changes that made us so efficient. My daily report was usually skipped in the end of day meetings as we had minimal issues. He focused on the other departments. The way we worked now meant that tech issues or appointment issues were also escalated and resolved quickly, as nothing slipped through the cracks anymore. The internet wholesaler worked really well with us as we set clear expectations with our customers, and we always had great data to back up the escalation process. Our most remote customers who had to wait long times for techs completely understood. Usually, a tech was taking a chartered bush flight out there, followed by some off-road driving to get to the customer to get a satellite internet connection installed. These customers were often hundreds of kilometers from the nearest town and understood the logistics that would be involved and the waiting periods. Very rarely was this an issue. On to the story. Now, while we had so many orders coming in, we had just as many, usually more some days, customers canceling their services. Largely due to the long support wait times or poor quality support response emails. This meant the general manager was panicking about our record, showing we were losing customers to the board and shareholders. In front of everyone, he had a massive yelling fit directed at me about the company's negative growth. And this was my fault, and I need to have every customer connected within 3 days or else we escalate it. We have too many orders not connected. No more excuses from the wholesaler. Did I mention they were great and moved heaven and earth for us? Escalating these and getting them connected was our number 1 priority. Follow them up daily. He's had enough of my team slacking off, etc. Everyone's jaws around me dropped. They knew we weren't perfect, but we were the smoothest running department in the company. I saw red and took a breath. That's fine. Cue malicious compliance. After that public dressing down, I immediately sent him an email confirming what he just said. I got it back in writing. Texts take longer than 3 days. Those orders and escalations become our #1 priority. He didn't say business days. So I sat with my team and informed them that our ticket queue is going to be in a world of hurt, but we need to make it clear to him that he doesn't understand how we work, what we do, and that the way he spoke about us was inappropriate. They are not to stress about the numbers. They are not to do unpaid overtime. I don't care that they are on a salary. Salary accounts for reasonable overtime, and this is not reasonable. They are to end work when their shift ends. Do not accept time off in lieu. Only accept paid overtime. I will take the fallout. They aren't paid to be stressed. Most days, we have to work on about 300 tickets total, and today was a Friday. Customer not getting connected until Tuesday, well, that's 4 days. Escalate. Customers' roads impassable due to floods, so tech has to wait for dry weather? Too bad. Escalate. We escalated about 50 new orders that day, which meant Monday we had the usual weekend and Monday orders plus those 50. That day, over 100 new orders were escalated, plus the 50 followed up. So our queue reflected we had about 450 tickets due. Less than a third of the new connections got connected, even though a tech wasn't needed. Next day, the same thing, except only a handful of orders got connected. Now we had 600 tickets overdue. By Thursday, support's being hammered by people asking about their connections. Overdue tickets hit the thousands. Wait times blew out, orders got cancelled, complaints got raised. Come the next Monday, the support managers were screaming at me to get my department in order. I directed them to the general manager. A meeting was called with all department managers over the current state of the business they found themselves in. When I was asked what was going on, I simply pointed to the email, referenced the dressing down my team got, and informed him I was simply following orders. That's ridiculous. Use your brain. You should know what should be escalated. I pointed out that I thought I did, right up until you screamed at me in front of the entire company and belittled me and my team. You made it clear I have no idea what I'm doing, and to do what you say. He informed me to go back to the way we operated, and he will review my workflows in detail at a later date. I tried to say it won't be that simple. We need to follow the escalations through with wholesale. Getting our queue back in order will take weeks. He wasn't having it. No, the new orders were our #1 priority again. Get people connected. I again moved to object, but another angry outburst informing me to do as he says. Cue malicious compliance round 2, and another follow-up email confirming. We stopped following up the escalations as we had too many new order tickets to process. By the end of the week, the wholesaler called an emergency meeting with the company board, a meeting I was not a part of. They were threatening to pull our wholesale agreement due to the escalated orders not in line with their matrix, and we had inundated their staff also. Not only that, we were no longer keeping up our end of the bargain following them up. This wholesaler was where a significant majority of our customers were fed from. After this meeting finished, I was pulled from my seat to explain myself to the board, emails prepared, and with the support and sales managers with me for support and as witnesses, I explained the above. I was cleared to leave. The fallout. My team and I were given a blank check for overtime to get us back in order. Unfortunately, no other staff from any other team could assist in a meaningful way. But my team were only too happy to put in as many hours of paid overtime the workplace laws would allow. The company also supplied dinners. It ended up taking us over 6 weeks to undo the damage the general manager had caused with the overtime. The wholesaler also reduced the remuneration we got paid as they no longer considered us a top-tier ISP. My reports were no longer skimmed, and the general manager sat with me often to understand how we worked, and complimented me on the innovations from my team's suggestions. He also didn't order me around like that again, but more asked for input before making recommendations. We also did get our top tier ranking back eventually. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called W1987G. It says, having to explain twice to the board why the people below him sucked, and their major wholesaler threatening to drop because of his direct actions, I am shocked that the dude still had his job. OP responded to this one and said, I wondered often, given how the other departments ran too. He had his good qualities, sometimes, but he was very much a work harder, not smarter kind of person to those below him. I was one of the few managers who didn't follow that ethos. I love managers who come in to micromanage everything when they really don't have a grasp on the business that they're managing. I really do think that managers should spend some time in the positions that they're managing, otherwise they can't manage it effectively. I hope the GM can now look at your team and understand what you do, and maybe just take a step back and let you do what you do, because obviously it was working before. But I have a feeling it's not gonna go that way. This story comes to us from Colt Kun. Gonna call the cops over a toilet? Sure, enjoy signing off that OT. So, Florida passed the crappy bathroom law saying people must use the correct bathroom as listed on their birth certificate. I'm non-binary, had some medical issues when I was young that were ignored by doctors and resulted in my reproductive organs and some intestine being removed. Then I paid to remove more stuff because why not? Eliminate a cancer threat. But I'm not on HRT, just generally very androgynous looking now. I don't really care what pronouns people use for me, and my wife switches based on which is funniest at the moment. At work, they told us they were enforcing the law strictly, and staff wouldn't just be disciplined, they'd get the police called on them. Note, there is one gender-neutral bathroom in our building in the admin offices. You have to be buzzed in. Once they leave the office, you have to call a facilities person to let you in, and security has to watch you. They're very big on enforcing a status around here. I got reported for using the wrong restroom, despite that it does conform with the gender on my birth certificate. I don't really mind which restroom I use, and in the past used whatever was available because I have IBS and use the bathroom frequently due to the aforementioned surgery. This just goes to show how effed up this law is, and how it's going to discriminate entirely on appearance. I was told I was reported, and I pointed out I was following the law. Didn't get in any trouble, but they said, well, I need to be mindful of what others perceive. Cue my compliance. I have exclusively started using the admin restroom, wasting multiple people's times. I press the buzzer and make someone let me in. I have already lodged a complaint about the time it took someone to answer and how withholding access to a bathroom could be an OSHA violation. I make sure to go after admin hours so security and facilities have to come up and report it, and I plan to complain anytime I wait more than 5 minutes for them to arrive. When we close and I'm on the floor, I say that I can't check and clear any of the restrooms, so the manager on duty has to find another person and stop their closing duties to do the other, because I helpfully remind them they can't check both or we have to call the police on them. Many of my coworkers are enjoying this and are supportive and doing the same at close. It helps that we are now getting 15 minutes overtime due to closing. Our clock rounds to the nearest 15, and it applies to everyone in the building, so 20 people worth of overtime a day, it adds up. After confronting me on why I'm using their bathroom, a member of admin said that they're now looking into how they can change our existing bathrooms to be gender neutral. I said, great, but I'm still going to use this one until then. Some other coworkers have said they're going to do the same. Still a crappy law, but with enough annoyance, I may be able to at least change our district. OP added an edit down below. It says edit because some of this has come up a lot. If you're confused or angry or want to tell me you're either a man or a woman, go in the right bathroom, please reread because your comprehension sucks. I did, and got reported because someone thinks I don't look the way I should to use said bathroom. You can look at my profile picture and see that I don't adhere to either gender stereotypes naturally. I did not pursue any action against the reporter, because if they reported me out of genuine concern, then it's pointless, and the problem is the law and establishment. And if they reported me because they're transphobic or malicious, then anything I do won't change their mind. And to be honest, I don't care to gain a rep for witch hunting, just for being annoying. I love our facility guys, and they seem to find it funny to break into admin offices. Security seems mostly annoyed that they have to stand and watch a hallway leading to locked offices instead of watching it on cameras from their booth. Hopefully, we get gender-neutral bathrooms, not just for staff, but our patrons as well. My wife is amazing. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called a midget named Greg. It says, as a person with Crohn's, you could get a letter from your doctor and really start pushing your weight around using the ADA. If there's one thing companies should never mess with, that's the ADA. OP responded to this one and said, I'm planning to. Just make this as big a nightmare as I can while sweetly smiling and saying I'm compliant. And another one replied down below that saying, make sure to have documentation, lots of it. Now, most of you know I have been pushing the documentation thing on here for years now, because you have no proof unless it's in writing or on video. And your word against somebody else's word just isn't going to cut it. Document everything you can to cover your own butt. OP, I'm pretty sure you're going to get your gender neutral bathroom soon, and that will be a better situation for everyone involved.